Hello, everyone. I'm Ramon Robinson with ALA Editions ALA Neal-Schuman. I want to welcome you all to the 7th meeting of Edie and Neal's Book Club, which is also our first virtual mini-conference. Today, our author experts will present 7 technology and technical services themed sessions that will each run 15 minutes in length. We encourage our audience to remain for the full program, which is scheduled to end at 4 p.m. Central Time, but you can also enter and exit and return for specific sessions. Our schedule is as follows. At 12:35, we will begin with tips for keeping up with the latest technology, which is by Robin Hastings, author of the forthcoming new edition of the Neal-Schuman Library Technology Companion, now available on the ELA Store website. Then we will have a Q&A for the remainder of the hour. Beginning at 1, we will do cataloging sessions, first with Ed Jones, author of RDA and Serials Cataloging, presenting how the new RDA impacts serials cataloging. Then we will move on to inclusive cataloging, presented by Rebecca Uhl, topic being inclusive cataloging resources, past and present. And then do another Q&A and have a little break, which I'm sure we will all benefit from. Then closer to 2, we will have our segments on AI. The first being AI Essentials, Top 10 Resources for School Librarians, presented by Delandrus Seales, whose book will be on the ALA Store website. Actually, I believe it is now on the ALA Store website. And then next we will have 5 Things Libraries Need to Know and Do About Generative AI, presented by Chris Rosser and Michael Hanegan. Starting at 12 or at 2:40 rather, we will do technology ideas from the academic library space, beginning with top 10 innovative approaches to outreach and instruction for digital libraries, presented by Anna Neatrour and Jeremy Myntti, who are the authors of the High Impact Digital Library, which has been shipping for a couple of months now. That program will be followed by 5 Things You Need for Creative Technology Space and 3 That Would Be Nice, presented by authors Vanessa Rodriguez, Eric Johnson, and Emily Thompson, whose book, A Complete Guide to Creative Technology Spaces in Academic Libraries, Media Labs, Makerspaces, and more, is also now available for pre-order on the ALA Store website. Lastly, at 3:30, we will have a session by Carli, Spina, and Rebecca Oling, Top Tips for Digital Accessibility Now, and they are the authors of the Digital Accessibility Handbook for Libraries, which is also on the ALA Store website. Let's begin, or let's take another little brief break, and then Robin Hastings will be on to present her session. Again, good afternoon, everyone, and we'll start shortly with Robin Hastings' session. To you view some of these slides about our other titles, and of course the public supporter program that you might be aware of from ALA Now, which will help libraries move forward in big ways. And welcome, Robin.
Nope, there we go. Hello. You'd think after 5 years we'd have where all these buttons are. 5 years of the Zoom culture. So hello, it's 12:35. So I will go ahead and get started. I am, as you said, Robin Hastings. I am the author of the Neal-Schuman Technology Companion, 7th edition. The previous 6 editions were shepherded through by John Burke. I've taken over as of this 7th edition, and I pretty much went through the whole book and updated and adjusted, and it's the same skeleton, but maybe with a new meat on it, hopefully. So I am the library services consultant for the Northeast Kansas Library System in Lawrence, Kansas. I am 27-year veteran of library technology. So I've been around for a while. I will point out that I have my robin.hastings@gmail.com. I was there when Gmail was born. So I get every now and then I'll fill out a form where they ask me for my email address, and these 20-something-year-olds will be agog. How did you do that? I was there when it was born. That's how I did it. So the book that is coming out in spring, I believe in May, possibly. That I'm not sure about the dates, but in that general area, is kind of, as it says, it's a basic guide for library staff. It goes through the landscape of library technology. And I think it's probably a good thing that I'm starting off, because this book is kind of a general overview. And then as the day goes on, you will hear details and specifics and more targeted things. But what I'm going to talk about today in regards to the book is how to continue learning after you've read the book. So there is the entire 16th chapter of the book is continuing on and learning more about technology topics in libraries. The book, however, is of course a moment in time. And so I wanted to update and expand on what I covered in chapter 16 and talk about what to look for when you're doing technology continuing education and where to look. And I have a list of my top 10 places. So we're going to start, before I jump into my list, with a quick what to look for, things that you might find useful in continuing education and professional development options that I'm bringing up. So some of the things that you want to think about: are you doing this for a certification, something you can print out and put in your personnel file? Do you need CE hours? Are you looking for those continuing education units, the CEUs? Some of these places give them, some don't. Those can be actually useful for a lot of different reasons, but they quite often can be used to document your learning. Are you skill building, or are you looking for resume fodder? Do you want something that will look good on a resume that you have taken care of, or is there a specific skill you're looking for? That's going to determine whether the kind of thing you're looking for is hands-on practical knowledge or theory with lots and lots of background information. I'm going to try and let you know as I go through my list of things here, which ones are heavy on hands-on practical knowledge and which ones you can go to maybe get more theory. One of the things to look for, and what I try to make sure I cover, are reputable organizations. There are a lot of classes on the internet, a lot of organizations offering courses, a lot of people offering courses, just kind of out there with varying degrees of quality. Let's put it that way. So everything I'm talking about today has some sort of connection to reputable organizations. Some of them are easier to find than others, and I'll try to cover those. So I also want to mention that learning about technology is not just the nuts and bolts of technology. There's a lot of tech adjacent stuff that you can look for. Things about artificial intelligence, wrangling and writing those prompts, productivity and task time management, that kind of thing I think is really important and requires technology. Well, it doesn't require technology, but it helps. And just about any other tech topic that requires tech to do the work, we will try to cover, at least in the 10 minutes that I have left, try to cover the gamut of those. So with no further ado, I'm going to jump into where to find some of these technology learning opportunities. Obviously, I'm going to start off with ALA. You can always come to ALA to get information about libraries and technology. They have e-learning courses that you can sign up for. They go for 4, 6, however long, many weeks. And they are valuable for a lot of different reasons. And ALA is, the divisions, ACRL, PLA, et cetera. Those are other places you can go for technology, but the ALA e-learning courses, kind of my first stop. So some of the ones that are coming up, some of the classes that are coming up in the next month or so include making your library website more accessible, AI chatbots and ChatGPT, and bookstagramming, leveraging Instagram to connect, promote, and reflect. So you can see that there's kind of a wide variety of things to learn here. You've got some maybe some theory. I imagine the AI chatbots and ChatGPT is a little more theory, whereas the bookstagramming is going to be hands-on skills that you can use. So there's a little mix there. Most of I think all of the people who teach these classes are practitioners. They're librarians in the trenches. And I'll say now, before I get too far into this, the first 3 sessions I've taught for all 3 of them, so I know them well. That's why they ended up at the top of the list. So I have done classes for ALA's e-learning courses, and I know of people who have also done them, and they are people who generally are working librarians who know what's going on. Library Juice Academy is another option. There you can do things like creating digital exhibits, technology literacy in young children, 0 to 5 years specifically, and transforming and querying XML with XSLT, and XQuery. So kind of again, wide range of technology topics, from more theory to hands-on hardcore coding kind of topics. They also have a large catalog of classes, not all technology related, but many of them do touch on technology in some way. Novare is a group that does technology and library training in the US. And a couple of the classes that they have to offer, they have a niche academy store that you can go and purchase training from. And some of the places that they offer are digital accessibility principles, an introduction to Section 508 compliance, protect yourself from identity theft, and mastering the search, essential skills for libraries. Again, you've got a wide range of things, more perhaps entry-level technology and better for your staff, your general staff, maybe, than your IT folks, but certainly somewhere to go that might offer you some more further learning in technology. Then these are also library-related places to find technology education. They are, however, I do not have any specific information about working with them, so I cannot say for sure how they work internally. But I do see, and I have attended several classes from Info People, and they are a great organization that have things like AI literacy for library workers and technology for libraries, which is a part of the library staff support staff certification. And it is, I believe, ALA certified, and it's a certification that allows support staff to get some library skills, essentially, that they might need just in working in libraries. And the technology in libraries is one of those. I believe it's one of the core classes. So that's available through Info People. PCI, the People Connect Institute, These are in Kansas, where I am based, we offer them through a niche academy interface, but they also have standalone webinars that you can purchase. And this is the ones that are available in Kansas. I noticed we had an appy hour, which I thought was clever. It's a little rundown of apps that might be useful for librarians. And then a 20 tools and tips for competitive market intelligence research in 60 minutes. So again, maybe more staff oriented than your IT folks, but still good technology information. WebJunction, I have actually worked with WebJunction. It's been a while back, but WebJunction offers a lot of courses, a lot of technology-based courses, including basic PC troubleshooting and computer networking for libraries. One of the things WebJunction offers that I don't see in a lot of other library-related technology offerings generally is that hands-on hardware, like troubleshooting PCs and networking skills. And so if you're looking for, less theory and more hands-on how to do things, WebJunction's a great place to get started. And then Niche Academy has its own little place where you can go and buy courses, and they, again, like PCI, are kind of technology intro level classes. And here we have avoiding common online scams and threats, and then a Google Forms class, how to create surveys, quizzes, and forms for free. So that is an option for, again, like I said, maybe some skills, but theory on a introductory level. There are, however, non-library focused sites that can be useful for technology learning. Coursera is one that I use on occasion. I like dipping in and out of classes there, where I just kind of pick up the things that I need and watch the videos and do that. I do not necessarily purchase the classes. They can run anywhere from $50 to, I think there's a all you can eat $300 a year option too. But you can audit any class for free on Coursera. You can't necessarily do the homework and get the quizzes and do all that, but you can at least get the information. And they offer things like strategic technology management, which is offered by the University of Illinois, the Urbana-Champaign campus, and IT fundamentals for everyone, which is offered by IBM. And I point that out because Coursera does tend to offer classes that are sponsored and offered by colleges and professors at those colleges, or by corporations like IBM. Google has a lot of classes there. They do a great job of providing generally video-based courses that can be useful for a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons. And so I wanted to mention that. Udemy is it's similar to Coursera. It's not quite as well connected with educational institutions. There are some, but it is, however, very well connected with skills, the hands-on kind of skills. So Python, complete course for Python beginners, is one of the options. And then the AI 900 Azure AI Fundamentals Complete Exam Prep. They have a lot of exam preps for a lot of different certifications in technology. And so those are options. They, again, are not going to be free. Then, very few of these are. Coursera's auditing being a notable example, but they can be pretty inexpensive if you are looking for something that is skills-based and can actually get you into being able to take a certification test and hopefully pass. And finally, we're going to finish up with the MIT OpenCourseWare. I mention this because it is useful. It is also very much college level. It is not for your beginning level of learning anything. This is where you go to get more advanced information on things like how to CAD, computer aided design, almost anything, and computer systems security. Again, you're not going to be joining the classes. You're not going to do the homework or get feedback from the professors. It is, however, free. Much like Coursera, you're more auditing courses in the open learning environment. It's more like that, but there are options. And I wanted to finish off with kind of a bonus list of conferences that's a great way to learn about maybe what's going on in libraries on the ground. And like I said, ALA especially is real good about having practitioners teach their courses. You're learning about the technology from people who use it and people who administer it. But conferences, you get kind of a view of what's going on right now. And so the IT-focused ALA division, the core forum, which I believe was in or will be in Denver this year, is a great place to go and find out about technology, as well as leadership and cataloging and different things that core covers, but it also covers the IT stuff. So that's a great way to get some IT knowledge under your belt. Other division conferences such as ALA and PLA, those kind of things, ACRL, like I mentioned earlier, these are all general library conferences, but they almost always have technology options, technology tracks, and technology just kind of standalone sessions that will be something you can attend and learn from. One of the things I am a huge fan of is going to non-library conferences, tech conferences specifically. I went to the National Association of Government Webmasters often as a baby webmaster in my first library job. They don't think about their libraries. These are people who are government webmasters. They're city webmasters. They're working on the police department and the fire truck or the fire department web pages, and it just never occurs to them that their library is there to be of service to them. And I get to learn about how the other government webmasters, because libraries are, of course, governmental entities, how they do their thing. And so I found that to be incredibly useful. And this slide, you'll notice, has a lot of question marks. This is where I will ask you guys to, in chat, put in maybe some tech conferences that you've been to that are not library related, but useful for you guys. I think my very first national speaking gig was at an XML conference in Boston in probably 2004. And again, it's not a library related conference. I didn't put it here because it's not I don't think it's continuing anymore. Or if it is, I couldn't find it. But it was handy to see what other folks who were writing XML code were doing, and to present what my library was doing with the XML code I was writing. And so that was a good experience as well. Of course, your state and local conferences. For me, that would be my KLA, Kansas Library Association conference. If there are any conferences, we have a CULS is what it's called. It's the Conference for University Libraries. That would be a place to go. Again, just like the national ALA conference, they also have technology options. And again, I have a question mark. What kind of things do you guys enjoy going to when it comes to conferences? What have you to share with us and during this question and answer phase? So I will finish off with my contact information if you'd like to get a hold of me. And let's see. I don't know if any questions have come in.
Yes, thanks so much, Robin. We do have several questions at this point, and then I'll also share some of the answers that have been given in the chat to your question about other
Sure.
events that might interest people, or other spaces where they might be interested in going. Rebecca Oling mentions, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, DEC University or DECU University. Maybe another tool you have access to is a system or consortia. Also, if you have a disability, I believe you can apply for free access. All of the modules are self-paced and offer certificates for completion. It's a wonderful way to sharpen digital accessibility skills. And
Excellent.
then some others mention, Louisa mentions IFLA WLIC and AIASL. Rita mentions Tech Talk. It is a resource website available via the Idaho Commission for Libraries. Kathleen mentions SIDLIT, SIDLIT. Let's see a couple of others here. Elizabeth White mentions OLE through Carnegie Mellon, which is free, and specifies that their evidence synthesis for information professionals is great.
And I
Some
noticed somebody mentioned IFLA. My list was very US centric, and I'm well aware of that. So thanks for bringing up the possibility of going outside of the country for that, because that is definitely a thing. So thank you.
Yeah, there are a lot of international attendees at this event via, I think, some of the listservs that the event was circulated on. Other questions for Robin, in terms of work crediting your continuing education, can it be worth it to do the non-library focused sites? Or would it be best to stick to library things? This person says, I do metadata work, so I don't want to fight with admin paying for it for me.
That's fair. I think for some of the bigger, like the Coursera stuff, again, it's, $49 is what the average Coursera course costs to get that certification. But it depends on whether or not your administration is going to recognize the class. And quite frankly, a lot of library admins are more familiar with library related technology courses. But Coursera, like I mentioned, is affiliated with universities and well-known corporations. So it's entirely possible that something like Coursera would be useful and would be something that your admin would recognize. I ask them. I mean, see if they what they think about the course, who's offering it, you know. But I would think Coursera would be a good non-library related place to find out things about. Um, I go there. I do. For a while, I was trying to wrap my head around library budgets, and so I took some finance classes through Coursera because there's not a lot. And I did take a finance class through ALA, but there's not a lot other than specific library budgeting classes that I could find. So there's going to be some stuff at Coursera that you might not find anywhere else.
And there are some other recommendations that have come through in the chat. LibTech Insights on the choice360.org website. Laura Luck mentions checking your local public and state libraries for free access to some of these resources, including Udemy, which you mentioned earlier, Robin. And then Claire mentioned seconding the checking local state libraries. CLA is open to library staff in California, and that might be the case for other libraries. A couple of other questions in the Q&A function. What are some of the technologies covered in your new book, especially as compared to the last edition?
Um, Gosh, I cover a little bit of everything. It is an overview. I do go into AI a little bit, so there are some updates. I talk mostly about how to manage hardware in the library, how to decide on what kind of software there's a discussion of open source versus more closed source conventional vendors. I talk a little bit about your website, the how it's hosted, um, what kind of skills you need to keep it up. I talk a little bit about social media. It's I tried, you know, books are of a necessity, set in time, but there are a lot of things in there that hopefully I mentioned Blue Sky, which is a new social media site. It is listed in there, and then some just kind of general how to deal with vendors and how to deal with patrons in your technology and what kind of things obviously I talk about security and that kind of thing as well. So lots of it's an overview of a lot of different kinds of technology that I have run into in the last 27 years of working with library technology myself.
And awesome for both practitioners and students, as with previous iterations. Other recommendations coming to the chat for where to get free and deployable resources. Budgeting for libraries is taught at SISLT, University of Missouri. All Pennsylvania residents can get a library card to Free Library of Philly. They have access to a lot of different programs such as LinkedIn Learning.
Yeah, LinkedIn
Um,
Learning is a great place to go to for all kinds of stuff.
and then the last couple questions, which are logistical.
Mhm.
There will be copies of the slides and the recording of this presentation, which will be on the main American Library Association YouTube page, either later today or tomorrow. And yes, we can save the chat and share the links with those who are interested, as so many have been shared. Um, that is it for questions from the Q&A function. Thanks so much, Robin. We will take a very short break of a couple of minutes, and then Ed Jones will be here to present on RDA and serials cataloging.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for your ideas. I'm going to grab the chat myself. So thanks.
Welcome, Ed, and we are able to see your screen.
Relief. Should I just begin, or?
You can go ahead. Welcome, Ed. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ed Jones, and other people are returning to the office, but I've been kicked out of my office, so I'm speaking from home. I should warn you, I have a cat, and she has just returned. She knows how to open the door, unfortunately. But anyway, let me begin my presentation. Basically, I'm going to be talking about why there had to be a new edition of my book, which is the new RDA. And I will begin that right now. And the reason there has to be a new RDA and serials cataloging is that it's the product of what's called the 3R project, which is the RDA Toolkit restructuring and redesign project. And part of that involved updating the conceptual model that underlies RDA. I'm not sure whether that was part of the reconstruction or the restructuring or the redesign, but the models that we had were the Ferber, Frad, and Versar, I suppose you would call it, models that underlay the original RDA. And those were superseded by a more high-level consolidated model called the IFLA library reference model. And this is the way it was. This was the Ferber modeling of serials. Actually, it was Ferber modeling of everything. If you took my book as a model, RDA and serials cataloging was a work. It was realized, or is realized, now through two expressions, which are represented by the original edition and now by the second edition. And each of those expressions were embodied in multiple manifestations. One was published here by ALA Editions. Another was published in the UK and overseas by a different publisher. I forget now the name of the publisher, but actually there were two manifestations. And then every single copy of either of those was an item. And that gives you the hierarchy of, excuse me, you get down there. Sorry. Gadget intervention. Anyway, that was the old modeling of everything in Ferber, and everything included serials. That changed with the IFLA reference model because aggregates, what are called aggregates, and serials were not reflected well in the Ferber model. And this is the modeling of aggregates, and I should explain what an aggregate is. An aggregate is a manifestation that embodies several expressions. That's, if you look at the diagram here, the works on the left are the expressions that are aggregated in an aggregate manifestation. Examples would be a collection of short stories for such as well, the author Ray Bradbury produced a book called The Martian Chronicles, and in the United States it had a certain arrangement and inclusion of short stories. In the UK it had a slightly different arrangement. In the modeling of aggregates, the selection and arrangement of the short stories is considered a separate work. And in the diagram, you'll see that on the right. That's called the aggregating work. And it has a single aggregating expression. And the editor of the book is generally responsible for this work. And so the aggregate manifestation is the result of both the works whose expressions are collected by the editor and also that work of collecting. And one of the results of this is that an aggregating work has a single aggregating expression. So that the UK edition of Martian Chronicles is one work, the US edition is a different work. And serials modeling in LRM takes it one step further. In a serial work, the work of the editor is joined by the work of the publisher. The serial work is defined by the publishers and the editors, this I'm quoting from the LRM here, intention to convey the feeling to end users that all individual issues do belong to an identifiable whole. And the collection of editorial concepts, a title, an overall topic, a recognizable layout, a regular frequency that will help to convey that feeling. And my example here is The Economist, which has a recognizable logo. It uses a standard typeface. It has a standard arrangement from issue to issue. The subjects occur in the same expected place. It even has a standard sort of editorial perspective that makes it recognizable as a whole. But the thing about the LRM modeling of serials is it recognizes that serials have no predetermined end. And as a consequence, each version of a serial may go its own way over time. And because of this, whereas the LRM modeling of aggregates has a one-to-one work to expression cardinality, as they call it, basically that the work can be realized in one and only one expression. The LRM modeling of serials involves what's called a WEM lock, a work expression manifestation lock. Not only is the work realized in just one expression, but the expression is embodied in just one manifestation. So basically, every version of a serial is its own work, which takes a bit of getting used to. But then in the RDA, the new RDA, this goes one step further. We come to something called diachronic works. Diachronic simply means over time. These are anything that is issued over time is a diachronic work in RDA. And this emerged from something a little different than the IFLA library reference model. This emerged from something that actually predated original RDA called the RDA Onyx Framework for Resource Categorization. It's the source of three of the existing elements in RDA, in original RDA, which are the content type, media type, and carrier type. Those all were the result of applying the RDA Onyx framework. And one new one has been added now with the new RDA, and this one is called the extension plan element. And like the others, which have their own mark field, the extension plan element has its own mark field. And it has five possible values. The extension plan is a categorization, this is taken from the RDA glossary, that reflects an intention to extend the content of a work. And what that means is anything that is issued over time, however briefly, falls into this category of having an extension plan. And there are 5 extension plans. One of them we can ignore. It's called the static plan, which basically has no extension plan. There is no plan to extend it. Every simple book has a static plan. But then there are 4 other plans, and those 4 other plans fall into the overall class of a diachronic work. There are the familiar ones that we consider when we talk about continuing resources in the original RDA, and these are the integrating indeterminate plan, which is any database that's continually updated would have an integrating indeterminate plan. That is, the content is replaced over time, added to, subtracted from, and it has no predetermined end, so it's indeterminate. Similarly, what we call a serial has a successive indeterminate plan. It's likewise has no predetermined end, but it's issued in discrete chunks over time that we call issues. But beyond this, there are 2 other categories that correspond to these but have determinate plans. Think of a conference website, for example, which is updated during the conference, but then once the conference is over, it ceases to be updated. And likewise, think of things like this example here. This is a book that was published in the last year, but it's part 1, covering a given period of time. And there's a part 2 that covers up to 1976 that will be issued this year. Even though it's complete in 2 volumes, it's issued over time, and so it is within the category of a successive determinate plan as far as the new RDA is concerned. And what this means is that it too falls into the class of things that have a Wemlock if you strictly apply RDA. In the end, this is going to obviously become a local question, and it is a local question in most communities. Just how strictly are you going to apply the Wemlock to all materials? That's the big thing that changes in RDA with serials. There are also some other things that change. It's aligned more closely with the ISSN network. This is due not just to a protocol that we've had since 2015 with the ISSN International Center, but the ISSN International Center, as well as the US National Center, were represented on the serials task force of the RSC Aggregates Working Group that was revising RDA as part of the 3R project. One result that's actually a result of the LRM, the WE lock, the work and expression lock, is that the preferred title of a translation that in original RDA, if you strictly applied it, was treated as an expression of a common work, is now treated as a work in its own right. And as a result, it's not entered under the title of the original, but under its own translated title. And this actually will bring it into closer alignment with the practice of the ISSN network, which has always used the title that's actually carried by the manifestation rather than trying to link it to the title of the publication, the original publication. Another result of the closer collaboration with ISSN network is a new element, which it's a sort of a family of elements. It's called the appellation of work group. And a work group is used to collect together related works. The one that currently exists is identifier for work group. This is an RDA element where that corresponds to the medium version ISSN, or the ISSN-L as we more commonly know it. And the identifier for work group, by carrying the common linking ISSN for the medium version serves to link together, for example, the online and the print version of a serial. And once the ISSNH, or the title history ISSN, becomes live, that will similarly use the RDA element identifier for work group to link together the titles that a serial has borne over time. But that brings me to the broader category of internationalization. Internationalization is something that RDA has strived for a long time. And as an example of it in the new RDA, it tries to accommodate differing practices between the Anglo-American community and what's called the DACH community, the German, Austrian, Swiss, German-speaking Swiss community that tries to coordinate their practices. And this involves minor changes in the title proper. In the Anglo-American community, if there's a minor change, we record the later title as a variant title of manifestation, and catalog as the title proper, the earliest title that a serial is born. In the German-speaking community, except German-speaking Switzerland, if there's a minor change, they record the later title as the title proper. And RDA accommodates this by allowing multiple values for all of its elements that change over time. For example, the publisher changes over time. You record multiple instances of the publisher element. If the title proper changes over time, you can record multiple instances of the title proper with associated dates. And then whichever one you choose becomes the preferred title. ISBD is another area where both RDA has collaborated with another organization. There's something similar to the protocol that RDA has with the ISSN network that they have with the ISBD review group. But RDA tries to be broader than simply the library community. That is, it's designed to accommodate many more metadata uses. And so in this version of RDA, the new RDA, ISBD punctuation has disappeared. But it should be borne in mind that the Statement of International Cataloging Principles, which is sort of the one statement to rule them all, does require ISBD as the standard for bibliographic description in the library community. So you should still be trying to do it, even though technically you could use RDA without doing so. I've always been a great fan of ISBD punctuation. I may be in the minority here, but I've always found it helpful, especially in visual displays where they don't have display constants, or in when you're dealing with a foreign library in a language you don't have any comprehension of. It's very useful to have the recognizable standard display with the punctuation. And in our own local Anglo-American community, the PCC metadata guidance documents, the string encoding scheme, as they call it, includes ISBD punctuation, though it's technically optional now. And I should warn you that there's a new ISBD in the works called the ISBD for manifestations, or the ISBD-M. And in its current state, it doesn't include any punctuation. So that ISBD punctuation may be on its way out regardless. And then there's what I've called internationalization and internal exile. Because RDA is striving to be a truly international scheme, they have removed things that are what are known as Anglo-American legacy instructions. Two examples of these that relate somewhat to serials are legislative bodies, which formerly had an instruction to enter them under the state or the jurisdiction, and whether you include intermediate levels of hierarchy when you're creating a multi-level corporate body. There was an instruction to omit unnecessary intermediate levels. Both of these have now been relegated to the resources tab in the RDA toolkit, where you'll find them under, let me see. Community resources, and then legacy RDA community resources, and then community refinements. So they've been pretty well exiled, I guess. And eventually, I suppose they will simply move to local policy statements. And finally, there's an entity called the Nomen, which again was inherited from the LRM and is basically an entity that allows you to connect a nomen string or a name, let's say, to an entity. And it was required mainly for linked data purposes that I need not go into. But one thing it helps us do, those of us who want to fudge, is it allows you to adhere to the letter of the Wemlock. That is, you can have your two serials, one for, say, the print version and one for the online version of a serial, with their discrete works at the top of the hierarchy. But then you can connect to that work a nomen. You can connect, say, to the Economist print version, nomen A, as I'll call it here, which has the nomen string, The Economist. And then to the online version, you can connect what I'll call nomen B, which has the nomen string, The Economist, which would allow your library then to display together the online and the print versions of this serial, even though they are technically discrete works, but they would be presented together for your users on the assumption your users prefer to see them together. You might decide your users would not prefer that. And then finally, there's a completely new structure to the rules. And this is particularly important for my book. There's an organization by guidance and entity and element that replaces the former arrangement by rule number. And so books like my book can no longer refer to rule numbers because there are no rule numbers to refer to. But what there are is what are called citation numbers. And you'll see that in this slide here at the very end. If you're looking for the guidance instruction on describing a manifestation of a diachronic work. If you have an online tool, you can just link to it by clicking on a URL. But they're very long gobbledygook URLs. You wouldn't want to encounter that in the book and then have to reproduce it. So the citation numbers are simple pairs, 4 pairs, 2 digits each. So for example, to get to this describing a manifestation of a diachronic work, you would simply enter in the search box of the RDA toolkit 09.24.31.35, and it would take you right to the instruction and would actually highlight it for you. And that's the way it is. And I hope I haven't run too much over time. But thank you.
Thanks so much, Ed. We are going to have Rebecca Uhl present next on inclusive cataloging, and then we'll have questions for both Ed and Rebecca after Rebecca's presentation. Welcome, Rebecca.
I'm having a few. All right. All right, can you see my screen? Whoops.
We cannot see your presentation yet.
Okay, that's, oh, wait. All right, sorry. I'm having a few technical difficulties working with a new laptop that doesn't like to respond. Okay, can you see it now? I hope.
Can't see it yet. Let me see if. It looks like something is showing. It's starting to show.
Okay.
There we go.
Sorry, like I said, this is a new laptop for me and it's not responding the way my old one did. Okay. Can you see it?
Yep.
I hope.
Can see the
Okay.
slide.
All right. My name is Rebecca Uhl. I am the principal cataloger and lead cataloging and operations at Arizona State University and the co-editor of Inclusive Cataloging, Histories, Contexts, and Reparative Approaches with Billy Albina, formerly known as Amber Billy, and Elizabeth Nelson. The book has two parts. The first part is focusing on history and theory of inclusive cataloging. And the second part is actually case studies of inclusive and reparative cataloging work done by a variety of different libraries of all sizes and configurations. So my list is actually, as we put this together, we noticed that certain people kept coming up in multiple chapters as either a subject, author, or both. And so my list actually highlights some of those individuals and their contributions. I would like to put out this caveat. This is not an all-inclusive list. This is from our book with maybe 2 or 3 additional names that came up in editorial meetings. So don't expect to have everybody doing the work listed here. So starting with the past, inclusive or reparative cataloging has a long history going back to the early 19th century and possibly before. And you may recognize some of these names, especially if you've read our book. First, in the area of subject cataloging, Sanford Berman was, he railed at the bias inherent in LCSH. And I read one little article that said he was the policy division's nemesis. He was all for natural language and bias-free language. He initially wrote his Prejudice and Antipathies book, and it was published initially in 1971. And it has gone through a few republications. As you can see, there's one here from 2014. Hope Olson was a professor, and I forgot to note at which university, I'm sorry. but she was active in the 90s and the early aughts, and she was doing the same about LCSH, but focusing more on feminist theory and biases in that construct. And these are a couple of her works, basically saying we needed to be less biased in our subject heading. In the areas of classification, a couple of names came up multiple times: Dorothy Porter Wesley and Brian Deere. Dorothy Porter Wesley was the librarian at the Moreland Spring Arm Research Center at Harvard University in the 1930s. And she rejected the Dewey classification's inherent racism, which essentially stuck all Black people in 325 and 326 for slavery, and I believe the other one would have been colonization. And she developed a classification that basically put Black authors throughout the classification. She was also a scholar of Black studies and has a number of works of her own. And she pretty much developed the Moreland Spring Arm Research Center that we have today at Howard University. She was instrumental in that. Brian Deere did pretty much the same thing for Indigenous peoples. He was active in the 70s. He created the Brian Deere classification system known as the BDCS, which was intended to be a flexible system which centered the local peoples, Indigenous peoples' experiences and worldview and their homeland. So it's different based on where the library was based and the people that were using the system. And I have a couple of links to the Huahwe Library at the University of British Columbia and Simon Fraser University's Indigenous Curriculum Resource Center, both of whom use the BDCS system. Those are people, the shoulders on which current catalogers are standing. More recently, it's been in the news a lot since 2016 and 2020. 2016, when Change the Subject, the illegal aliens to-do came up, and the 2020 murder of George Floyd. There have been many, many people dealing with reparative and inclusive cataloging, and these are the people who are going to be on the next couple of slides. And you'll probably recognize the names. Violet Fox and Tina Gross were heavily involved in the illegal aliens business, and they continue to advocate for changes to LCSH. Violet created the Cataloging Lab to provide documentation and guidance on ethical cataloging for not just catalog librarians, but anybody interested. And Tina Gross was involved, actually featured in the Change the Subject film that was about the Dartmouth students' original challenge to LCSH. And she, both Violet Fox and Tina Gross, wrote a couple of chapters in detailing the illegal aliens to-do in detail, if anyone wants to go farther. B.M. Watson, Bree Watson, with dozens of other people, developed best practices for metadata on trans and queer people, and those are documented in the Trans Metadata Collective and the Queer Metadata Collective. And Bree is still heavily involved with advocating for equitable treatment for the LGBTQ plus population. and is quite active in that area. Rewrote one of our chapters, and the trans and queer metadata collectives both appear in a couple of other of our chapters as well. K.R. Roberto, another person working with LGBTQ issues, was instrumental, I think, or perhaps the only person involved with the Rainbow Roundtable Oral History Project. Rainbow Roundtable, of course, is from ALA. And K.R. Roberto also was an editor of the Radical Cataloging book published in 2008, and I believe Sanford Berman wrote one of the essays in that, if I recall correctly. And I would like to call out my fellow co-editor, Billy Albina. She worked heavily with the PCC and in how to address gender and privacy issues in authority metadata. And there are a number of works available on her website if anyone wishes to go. I did not put the link there, but if you were to search for either her Billy Albina or her former name, Amber Billy, you'll find it. And these are a couple of the articles that she wrote. So those are the, that's my list of people that appeared in our book, plus a couple of others. That is not all of the people mentioned in our book. It is just the ones that appeared in various places. Oops. And it's basically the past and present and along into the future. Again, a caveat, many people are doing and have done inclusive and reparative cataloging. This presentation could only highlight a small fraction of them, and it focuses on those that appeared in our book. I would like to extend kudos to everyone. Everyone doing this work, especially now. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And we certainly understand the feeling around all of this. We really appreciate your time and Ed Jones' time as well. I'm going to ask Ed to unmute and return to the camera for Q&A. And then Rebecca, when you're ready, you can also do the same. Let's see. Lots of accolades and hugs and goodwill in the chat. Looking for questions from the audience. I know someone had asked earlier, I think it was how the 3R project is the question up here. Why did RDA move from static numbers to citation numbers? That is a question for Ed Jones.
Well, the main reason was it was the change in the structure of the toolkit that was reorganizing itself as a data dictionary, so that the approach that you take to it now is no longer a like a book, a continuous thing, but rather you're approaching it in terms of individual elements, individual entities. So the numbering became superfluous in a way, but also, as I think Adam Schiff pointed out in the comments, numbering can get very long as you keep having to squeeze in additional instructions into the existing structure. It can become unwieldy. The main reason for the citation numbers was to support books like mine that have to refer to the toolkit, but can't use the techniques that online tools can use, which is simply to embed a URL into their product, and you simply click on the product, and no matter how long and unwieldy the URL is, it's simply a click for you. If I tried to put a URL into my book, I would get a lot of angry letters from people who had to then type character by character the URL into the. So the citation numbers are a solution to that. So in a way, the citation numbers and the rule numbers, while they serve a similar purpose in a print product, the reason for getting rid of the rule numbers or the instruction numbers was totally separate from the reason for creating the citation numbers.
Gotcha. We'll have another question for you shortly, but I'm going to do one from Kirsty Haddon for Rebecca now, and I might ask for clarification of the acronym. Rebecca, do you have examples in your book of recent changes in LCSH? Do they also cover disability, where terms have also changed over the years?
LCSH is Library of Congress subject headings. And yes, there are some examples. The book was published last year, so none of the examples actually deal with the more recent changes to accessibility. The change, for example, of, and now, of course, it's just flown right out of my head, but various people with disabilities are now not people, they are now people-centered. And if I remember one, I will bring it up, but my mind just went blank. But yes, there are examples of changes to subject headings and how libraries dealt with them of various sizes. Right up from one-person small libraries to consortia of very large research libraries. So that's all in the case studies section.
And Rebecca, I think, has some additional explanation in the chat. She said, do you mean identity first versus person first language?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Example, I am a deaf student versus I am deaf. Kirsty Haddon also has another question for Ed, which is, are there any other websites you can recommend to learn about serials cataloging? And maybe you can type them into the chat so that people will not write you angry letters about sharing URLs.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the CONSER program, which is part of the program for cooperative cataloging, has a lot of materials. Everyone is really trying to catch up with the new RDA. So materials are being added, especially by the PCC Standing Committee on Training, to ease people into the new RDA toolkit. So it's I think a lot of cases it's a work in progress. The only national library that so far has implemented the RDA toolkit, to my knowledge, is the National Library of New Zealand. And I believe they will be releasing their training for serials cataloging around July of this year, even though their own catalogers are now cataloging serials with the new toolkit. So it's coming, but it'll be slow to appear.
Awesome. I have another comment from Adam in the chat. Deaf became deaf people, hearing impaired became hard of hearing people. And then a comment from Seven to adopt, wondering about the adoption of RDA in the toolkit in the wake of the 3R project. in the coming years. Do you have any other insight into that, Ed?
It's coming. The program for cooperative cataloging has a window of implementation, but my understanding is that it will be implemented together when it comes. It may be that certain parts might be implemented ahead of time, for example, relating to authorized access points and so on. But again, that's outside of my remit, as they say. But yes, I believe 2027 is the last time it might be implemented, but probably before then.
So,
I would like to thank Adam. That was those were the headings I was trying to think of, and they just flew right out of my head as soon as I tried to get them.
yeah, well, I want to thank you both. These cataloging presentations, which are overlapping in terms of there's a definite EDI shade thread with the internationalization of RDA. It's such an inclusive system. And then with the ongoing reparative work that you and your co-authors are doing, Rebecca, which we thank you so much for and encourage you to continue doing. And you know that you have a lot of support here at ALA for that work. We're going to take a short 2-minute break, and then we will begin our AI session with AI Essentials Top 10 Resources for School Librarians by Delandrus Seales, who is the author of the forthcoming Leveraging AI in School Libraries from Basics to Best Practices. Thanks again, Ed and Rebecca, and we will take a 2-minute break. And welcome to Land.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Potentially good morning to any of my colleagues on the West Coast. Good night to anyone abroad, and maybe even a good tomorrow morning to anyone who is overseas on the other side of the date line. I'm so happy to have you all join us today. And so I'm going to go ahead and pop something in the chat for you all, just to give you an idea. This actual session presenting right now, if you are not a school librarian, you may find some things, some tips and tools you can find relevant to your own work. So I do hope that those of you who are not in school libraries can stay, because I'm personally I have the experience of enjoying both the school library, the public library, and I'm currently in an academic library. My name is Delandrus Seales, and I'm going to present the top 10 resources for technically all librarians. My upcoming title release with ALA Editions is going to be called, or is called, Leveraging AI in School Libraries from Basics to Best Practices. Just some notes, you'll find a QR code in the top right-hand corner of every slide. I have the bit.ly here as well in the bottom left for you all. But again, you can use that QR code and we'll continue to show. So the links are in the chat. Thank you, Ramon, for putting those in there. I'll keep posting those as well throughout. But from Wilmington, North Carolina, the home of Jim Cantori during the weather seasons that probably bring us the natural disasters we see most, I'm happy to share my top 10. And so just a few things about the book. If you'd like to get some updates on the book's release, I have a bit.ly here as well as a QR code. But this title in itself is going to be aligned with the upcoming revision of the AASL standards. Going to include some integrated lessons and practices with AI, or AI integrated lessons and practices. And of course, it'll be pertaining to both elementary, middle, and high school levels. And because of my time as a special education teacher, as well as a high school science teacher, you will see that they're content area aligned lessons, as well as some practices, as well as features on accessibility, differentiation, including AI policy development bias, as well as academic integrity. And so you can continue to take a look at this in the bookstore. Feel free to contact me at the email address I provided. But of course, you can always sign up to receive some updates. And so just to kind of get an idea of who you are in the audience, if I may ask, if you're an elementary school librarian, put it up in the chat. Let us know where you are. If you're in the middle schools, let us know. High schools. If there's anyone who's in a high school or even an early college, I would love to see you shout yourself out. If you're an academic library, you're still doing the work, especially partnering with your local school libraries. But of course, public libraries, if you're in youth services, yes, applause to you all. Thank you all for everything that you do to help educators do their work and serve students in their best. So thank you all. But continue to give yourselves a round of applause, and I thank you all for all that you do. And so you might be wondering, like, what in the world is artificial intelligence? And so I'm just going to have this very brief moment to describe that it's just a way that we're using or making computers act and think like humans, right? It's the computer does not have a brain, but in the sense, metaphorically, it's like giving them a brain. It's helping them make decisions. And technically, it uses what we give it as far as information and data to help it learn. And so, it uses these, plans, it uses data sets. We call them algorithms, things like machine learning and deep learning, tech terminology. And all of this helps it identify patterns and, of course, make predictions. So once again, it only does what we have programmed it to do. And I say we, not necessarily me, but it only puts out what, based on the patterns and predictions it can make from what's going on. So we're going to go through a few of the top 10 here. So there's going to be multiple categories, multiple tools, and every tool itself has multiple uses and functions. And continue to shout yourself out. I'm loving seeing you guys celebrate yourselves in your various categories of librarianship. And so let's look for some general use tools. And now you guys continue to shout yourself out. If anyone has used ChatGPT, or maybe even Google Gemini, Copilot, those are 3 very general use tools. Gemini and Copilot can be embedded into the Google Workspace, Google Desk, Google Tools, or even Microsoft Copilot with all of the Microsoft tools. And all of these are just things you can go to, very similar to how you might use Siri or Alexa, just very general things. It can even be personal, it could be for work. But of course, with Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, Google Gemini, those are workspaces that maybe even some of the school districts, university or academic library systems might even be using. They might be testing them out. There might be some trial periods you may have a chance to participate in order to learn more about their potential case use. And so take a look at those. If you have an opportunity to receive some of those extended features, please do so. Microsoft Copilot actually is using the ChatGPT 4.0 embedded. So if you didn't want to pay that $20 a month for ChatGPT, I highly recommend trying out maybe a trial or a campus level subscription to that Microsoft Copilot. Next, we're going to talk about lesson planning and activities. And if for anyone out there, if you have used any of these AI tools, please feel free to share what you've used and maybe put a case, best practice or a case in which you've used it, found success. Don't forget to share, also maybe some means by which you might have found there was a consequence that you didn't intend, and maybe something to help us learn from each other. But for lesson planning in the K-12 land, you might have heard of School AI, Magic School AI, Brisk Teaching, PurePod. A lot of these have some great practices and lessons for you to differentiate learning to students based on their needs, whether there are students who may have disabilities, maybe they're students who might be performing under level. They also have extension features. Brisk especially has a Google extension to where, just in the browser, especially students who might be using Chromebooks, they're able to, immediately go to that extension and almost have some of the things actually populate for them from their teachers as well. So some of these tools have student platforms as well as the platforms that faculty or instructors or teachers, school librarians can use. And so next we're going to take a look. I'm not the best artist. I probably would say I'm pretty big on stick people, even though I'm past elementary school. And so I really do rely on computer technology to help me with graphic design. I say Adobe Firefly, but essentially you can use almost any Adobe tool. You could be using Adobe Creative Cloud. You could be using Adobe Express. A lot of schools have district level subscriptions potentially to Adobe Express, but there's no difference. Any of the AI tools in there can help you, come up with a graphic very quickly. They'll have a prompt, ask, that you'll be able to ask it a question, say, develop a flyer for me for an upcoming bake sale that we're going to have, or we're going to have a band performance perhaps, or chorus performance, spring fair, spring carnival. All of these tools like Adobe Firefly or Adobe Express, Canva, can definitely do that with their AI embedded tools. DALL-E is another one that's used less of. It's based on OpenAI. And so this is another one that can even have some 3D potential. But this one's a bit lesser used and maybe more appropriate for more of the higher ed students, whereas Adobe Express and even Canva have some great uses for us as the faculty or as the teachers or educators, but they're also very easy to use for students. So let's go to the next one. Let's take a look at writing. And so some of these are not necessarily completely AI. Grammarly is an AI-powered tool. And an AI summarizer is another AI-powered tool. Brainstorm AI is a specific feature within Grammarly. Sometimes we just want to make sure we're writing emails that help us stay employed, right? Maybe we might have that questionable email from a parent, maybe a community member. There's a lot of things going on, and or maybe it can even be from admin or another educator, a fellow colleague. And sometimes we just need to watch, maybe our tone, perhaps, get some better words. We used to walk away, draft something, come back. But maybe, just maybe, you might need to receive a little bit of help. Or maybe you don't have a lot of time and you don't have that time to go through the revision phase with some of your writing. Again, all of these tools are for school librarians, but of course, these also have practical applications and means to be used with students as well. So I encourage you to explore these with students once you have explored them yourselves. AI Summarizer is pretty great. You might have a lot of text. You might have a very long email from an administrator that, of course, could have been 3 bullet points. Or maybe you might have meeting summary, meeting notes. Maybe if you use an AI feature in Zoom or another meeting platform like Meet, maybe you need to take that and break that down. If you've taken that transcript, you want to break that down and put some bullet points in. Maybe you might need to get some ideas. So Grammarly Brainstorm is very good at that. This is actually a really good tool for students, of course, to use, very free. In fact, all of the tools I'm mentioning here, unless you have a district subscription, they are pretty much 85% free. So for some very basic use or for some limited use, it might say you have 30 prompts, 10 prompts, or 15 prompts. And Grammarly Brainstorm AI is very good. A student can say, I need some ideas on an upcoming paper that I have to write on Shakespeare. And Grammarly Brainstorm AI will do just that. Or I need, some ideas for an upcoming science project. I'm studying force and motion in physics, and it could help them get some ideas for a science project. When it comes to writing too, and I told you, I was thinking on us, staying employed and writing those wonderful professionally correct emails, but we also are engaged in research, or maybe we're helping our students, citing our sources. We're librarians at the end of the day. And so Cobalt is just another tool that you can use to generate citations in various style guide formats. It also has some writing tools on the left navigation page that can help you paraphrase, help you rewrite, help you summarize, also help you with your tone as well. And there's also features to help you with grammar, punctuation, spelling. Again, all of these tools are very free. And it also has some AI detection. We'll talk, I won't have a chance to talk about it, but in my book, I do talk about the fact that, AI detection features, just like with AI's hallucinations and so forth, all these things are never 100% guaranteed. There's always inaccuracies, there's always issues involved. And so you cannot rely solely on just one tool. The best thing you can do is build relationships with your students if possible, in order to get to know what is their writing, what is their voice. But let's keep moving on to the next one. When it comes to research, this is definitely more for my academic, maybe my high school minded folks, or anyone working on active research. Is there anyone out there working on their doctoral degree, or maybe they're engaged in maybe helping students who are working on their masters or have clinical students? They could be engaged in research to where they may need to, take seed articles, and maybe even find the relationships between those articles. So I highly recommend for research tools like Litmaps, Perplexity, Research Rabbit. They create wonderful visualizations to show how the articles are connected based on either methodology, using the literature reviews, as well, to see themes that are connecting, especially from the coding that particularly happened as they analyze results. So all of these tools again have free, very, very free means of usage. And so these are things also to explore. Next, I'm going to go into databases. Here in North Carolina, we are funded by our state in order to have what's called NC Live. It used to be called NC Wise Owl in the K-12 school system, but it allows us to have access to databases. This has been in use almost my entire life. And so I grew up with NC Wise Owl. And so, knowing about JSTOR and ProQuest, who knew I'd be a librarian? But all of these tools are now developing their own AI-powered features. JSTOR has an interactive research tool. Even the Oxford English University has an AI search assistant, and ProQuest does as well. Now, some of these tools might be free right now. I highly suggest you guys take a look at those free trials. But chances are they're probably going to package these as a feature, like an add-on, very similar to an add-on where you maybe have to pay for these tools in the future, but who knows? If they work very well, and we're actually engaging with the databases more, increasing their access, it may be that this becomes actually not an add-on, but maybe a part of their basic system. Let's take a look at tutors. If anyone remembers Khan Academy, perhaps if you remember Khan Academy when it rolled out probably about 20, almost 25 years ago. I see some thumbs up there. Khan Academy created kind of a personalized tutor program that's actually free to school districts. And in fact, you sign up at the very district levels, called Conmigo. And this one is very heavily integrated with state standards, national standards. Khan Academy has been around again for almost 25 years. So they've really done the work to engage with districts all across the country. I'm not really sure at the international level of its impact and how well it may be aligned to those standards. But this one is very much featured on the students, the actual what the actual students put in, right? That's the student input, the student data. So, with quizzes and activities, it takes those and it finds ways to differentiate the learning to meet the students where they currently are. So with pre-assessments, post-assessments, and benchmarks along the way, of course, through educator guidance, Conmigo is really a very powerful tutor. School AI has some of the same features as well. And School AI is also free. I mentioned it before as another platform that can be used to develop activities and lesson plans. And so, an educator can create assignments and activities, push them out to the students via Google Classroom, perhaps, or Seesaw, any other platform, Canvas. Maybe if they happen to be in high school, you could push them out in that way, aligns with an LMS. And so this is just another means of use. And when it comes to accessibility, I was a special education teacher for quite some time. And so, sometimes I'll admit, reframing myself in order to create alt text or even descriptive text. There are quite a few alt text generators. This is just one. And of course, we're also seeing an increase of students who happen to be neurodivergent, and never want to forget about them. It doesn't mean they're autistic, doesn't mean they're ADHD. We never want to put a title to a category of eligibility of disability. But in any case, this is Goblin Tools is a wonderful feature that can be used to help students when it comes to maybe breaking things down or reordering their processes. If you haven't looked at this before, it even also helps you with your tone, helps students get the idea of, I need to make what I'm saying a little bit more professional instead of it sounding so casual. But it really takes the noise away for students who might happen to be neurodivergent. There's lots of different features to engage in. But for the most part, you can use any general use tool that I mentioned before to help you potentially with language translations. If you have some, short bits of text, you can do some very brief generalization, differentiation. So if you have a few paragraphs, you can say, I want to, change this third grade reading passage to maybe at least 1 or 2 grade levels above, to differentiate above with increased vocabulary, perhaps. And you can do those things, or you can also drop it down below a grade level or so to help with students, to meet them at their needs. But of course, with all of these, I mean, I'm mentioning tools, but maybe you just need to learn a little bit about AI. There's some wonderful platforms out there. Grow with Google has their generative AI for educators. Code.org, Lord no, oh no, oh, excuse me. We all know that code.org with Hour of Code in December, I think it's like the second week of December, has been very powerful in teaching students computer science education. Has been endorsed by so many groups and educators and institutions around the world for the work they've done over the last 20 years, especially to embed even celebrities and other folks who are famous in the science world in order to show students that it is possible to potentially have a career in the sciences or even as an educator. And so code.org, it doesn't have to stay within December for our Code and Computer Science Education Week. We can use it for ourselves, and we can take their AI 101 course. Microsoft also has an AI for educators with their Grow with Google program. If anyone is in a public library, you may have may have also heard about, Hour of Code, potentially, or even Grow with Google. And if you have, please share your experiences with those. There are quite a few modules in Grow with Google that can be used outside of AI. Grow with Google has one for general digital literacy that I have used in a public library setting. Very free modules, and also tied in with Dollar General. They have the digital literacy grants. I don't know if they're still active, but they helped to pay for some of the training involved with Grow at Google. So take a look at some of those. But as always, there's so many tools, so little time for us today. But there's even more than this. I just gave my top 10 categories, but there are many other tools available to be used, including things like EduAid, QuestionWell is another one. And here I mentioned Adobe Express, but at any time, please explore, please dive in. If you have a potential case in which you've used AI, feel free to share that in the chat. But don't forget that there's limitations of not just ChatGPT, but any generative AI. It could produce some biased content, and you have to have these conversations with your students. Depending on the platform, it could have very limited knowledge of world events post 2021. It is not an ethical means by which you can make decisions. It struggles with math. And yeah, incorrect information comes from it. Alexa's wrong a lot of the time. We as people are wrong. We can't expect our computers to be more accurate than us based on the data that we put in. And of course, because it is not a person, it does not have the ability to have that human means of expression. So remember to review, evaluate, and refine, because it is best with a person. With us as a librarian, we're subject matter experts. We're like a quality control officer or quality assurance officer. And we must make sure that we share with our students that we are the knowledge experts, and we can help guide them as they critically evaluate what they're actually putting in as a prompt, as well as the results that come out. They always must learn that they don't accept it without looking for that accuracy, the completion, and the bias. And so learning how to prompt, don't have time for this, but learning how to write effective prompts is the most important thing. Some of these tools don't necessarily have prompts, but they are AI powered. But just a reminder here to make sure that you are very clear, that you are logical, and you provide the context. Remembering who you're writing, who your prompt needs to be targeted to, making sure the level is appropriate, and making sure that you are chunking, you are breaking this down in small amounts, because if you give it a large task to do, it is going to struggle with giving you something that you need. At the end of the day, generative AI cannot replace human creativity. It cannot replace critical thinking, problem solving, empathy, and human interaction. And so it's always something to keep in mind, because it is a helpful tool. It is a useful tool. But again, we're subject matter experts. We're quality control experts. we must put human eyes on it, and we must make sure that our students are also partners with the generative AI tools and AI powered tools that they are using in the school library and in the classroom. So together, librarians, no matter your discipline department, your area, your public, academic, school, if you work with early colleges, elementary, middle, or high school, no matter where you are, even higher ed, or maybe you're an administrator, we can use AI together to enhance learning, improve productivity, generate and organize our content. But remember that cheating, plagiarism, all those things can be addressed, as well as also helping students address learning gaps. So once again, everyone, my name is Delandrus Seales. This was the top 10 resources to help you all as you explore AI. I have a URL here for you. And you can, of course, take a look at the upcoming text coming out there. It's in the bookstore. And as always, this is a great means for anyone, whether you are in that level or in that area. If you're just looking for, how do I begin? Or I have a little bit of knowledge, but not a lot, that is absolutely okay. There are 2 chapters on the AASL standards, but the rest actually like a chapter. But no matter what, the subject areas are still relevant to those in academic libraries. You may just want a very plainer language text to help you, guide you in your journey. So please do take a look, sign up potentially for some updates. You can always send me a message to ask questions. I'm happy to help you all. I'm still on the X, but who knows, there'll be some other platforms along the way. But definitely contact me, reach out, and I'd love to hear from you all. So again, put your questions in the chat. I'll take a look, and I'll come back with you all as we come back for our Q&A in just a short while. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you so much, Delandrus. That was really interesting and balanced and fun to listen to as well, like all the other presentations preceding it. We will now have Chris Rosser and Michael Hanegan, who are presenting 5 things libraries need to know and do about generative AI, and they are the authors of Generative AI and Libraries, Claiming Our Place in the Center of a Shared Future, which, like Delandrus's book, will be coming out later this year. Welcome, Michael and Chris.
All right, thank you. And Ramon, I'm so sorry, I can't share my video because when I came in, I think you turned it off, if you don't mind to open that up. While we're getting, there it is. Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you, friends. We're very happy to be here with you today. And quick shout out to Delandrus. Really a great presentation, and we serve on the ALA Library Ecosystem Committee together, so it's really cool to be in this space together as well. My name is Chris Rosser, and I serve as the first year and transfer experience librarian at Oklahoma State University. And Michael, let me go ahead and we'll move on to the next slide. Would just like to share about this book that is going to be coming out this summer on generative AI and libraries. Let's go one more slide, if you don't mind, Michael. So I've been at OSU for a year. I've been a librarian for a lot longer than that. From 2009, I started working as a theological librarian. So Michael and I were introduced to these conversations about AI while thinking about that subset of librarianship called theological librarianship. In November-ish 2023, we wrote a white paper on AI and theological education, and trying to sketch out some big picture notions for what the implications are of the onset of generative AI for this field of libraries. What we started to realize through those conversations is that it's not just subsets of libraries, it's actually all libraries across the ecosystem, academic, public, special, school. What we're seeing right now with the onset of AI really presents us with a moment where the library ecosystem at large can really come together as a kind of critical mass, or what we're calling a center of gravity, in which we really claim the center, a meaningful center, in these emerging conversations about how to meaningfully integrate AI. So the book that we've written, Generative AI and Libraries, is taking a bit of a higher view. We're not in the midst of tools, et cetera, but we're talking about frameworks and orientations and ways of thinking about how do we as librarians begin to integrate AI in our context, and also how do we begin to help shape the conversations within the communities and within the institutions where we live and where we work. So Michael is going to introduce himself, and then we'll talk about our list here.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Hanegan. I am the founder of Intersections, a learning and human formation company, and I'm also an adjunct professor of AI and the future of learning and work at both Rose State College, where I teach undergraduates, and the University of Central Oklahoma, where I teach MBA students in the business school. My work generally is trying to explore the intersection of generative AI, learning and work, and the reintegration in that sense of learning and work. I didn't know anybody else to do this work with better than my dear friend Chris. And so I have been introduced to the wonders of library world as a visitor, as a guest. But we do believe, and our book, I think, deeply reflects that we recognize that the essential skills that we need, not just for generative AI, but to build the world we actually want to live in, already exist in libraries. And so we hope that this text will help to catalyze that latent experience, wisdom, and expertise that's already there in ways that can help us meet this really, really new moment. So what we wanted to do is just briefly give you 5 things that libraries need to know and do about generative AI. Some of this is drawn from our book, and some of this is just, we just think it's important to talk about. And so we'll run through these together. The first is that we need to talk about generative AI as an arrival technology. So we typically have 2 ways to talk about technology. One is as an adoption technology, and one as an arrival technology. So if we were to say, do you remember the first time you got a cell phone, right? When we walked in, you know, for those of us who aren't particularly young anymore, we bought phones that were not made for human pockets and that were bulky, and you know, we had free calls after 7 p.m. Like, it was a different world. But we purchased a cell phone because we chose to. It was either a matter of convenience, there might have been some social pressure, but our world was kind of, we chose when we entered into that part of our shared life. And arrival technology doesn't function in that way. An arrival technology is a technology that emerges and shapes the world in which you live, whether or not you participate. Think about electricity or the internet, right? The ability of this technology to shape and reshape the world in which you live is not dependent upon your participation. Generative AI is perhaps the most transformative arrival technology in human history. The speed and scale and scope of that change is unprecedented and accelerating. And so I think it's important to recognize that in some ways we can choose whether or not we adopt, but we cannot, by our refusal to adopt or by our hesitation to adopt, delay the way in which it shapes the world in which we live.
Michael, are you doing the second one, or is it me?
No, go ahead.
Okay, very good. Yeah. So the second point that we'd like to make is that human-centered libraries make human-centered AI. Okay. And what we mean by this, when we talk about human-centered, because we understand that that kind of language might, you know, confer the idea or convey the idea that we're just thinking about humans. And that isn't what we're thinking about. Let me go to the next slide, if you don't mind. Michael, so I lived in Japan for about 7 years, and it was a profoundly formative experience. And one of the proverbs that I encountered there, interestingly enough, became a core or central way that I understand libraries, because the proverb, in no shita no chikara mochi, is pointing to the strong person under the floor. And what they mean by this is that there's often a kind of invisible presence that maybe is less seen, but is supporting the whole. And for instance, that is what libraries are to a remarkable degree. We in our institutions and in our communities are often those who are supporting, for example, the information substructure of our institution. We're the ones who are promoting workforce empowerment, student empowerment in profound ways. we're not necessarily dealing with or instructing with specific kinds of literacies. We're dealing with all literacies. We're having to train digital literacies and provide information literacy, et cetera. So we're doing all of this work, but oftentimes that work is just kind of felt without acknowledgement. And what Michael and I are wanting to say is that this is a moment, actually, when libraries can remain as the strong one under the floor, but also to emerge as these new centers of gravity. Let me go to the next one. And we do that by acknowledging that libraries have always been human-centered institutions. And when we speak of human-centered AI and libraries, we're not talking about human supremacy or some kind of exceptionalism. What we're acknowledging is something that is simpler and it's more profound, and it's this: we're the ones who have agency to shape how AI is going to develop and impact our world. And the way that we as librarians exercise that agency is actually by owning it, by acknowledging it, that we do have some agency in how this is going to be shaped, and by also paying attention to how we operate within the ecosystem, including within our professional organizations like ALA, et cetera, and how we begin to leverage these kinds of relationships in order to advance policy, in order to shape, if not at the national or even global level, at least at the local level or at the institutional level, how AI is integrated in our contexts. And so we think understanding this human-centered approach is very helpful for us. Let's go on to the next. All right. And we also want to say that along with that, that libraries are going to lead with literacy. So we believe that AI literacy presents a profound catalyst for uniting the library ecosystem. In other words, AI literacy is going to be something that all of us in all of our various contexts are going to be teaching, deepening, fostering in various ways. And here's the reason for that. What it takes to use and to be good at using AI actually is not really anything different from all the kinds of literacies that we have already been developing in our communities. Digital literacy, visual literacy, information and media literacies, the kinds of critical questions that we are helping people learn to ask, the kind of critical thinking and critical engagement that we help to foster and provide. In fact, those are all the things, all the skills that are needed for using AI well. And so we as librarians, we have everything we need, and we believe that libraries are going to lead through these kinds of literacies. Go ahead, Mike.
Number 4, straight again out of library world, is that we believe that meta literacy is fundamentally AI literacy. This is a term that's thrown around a lot right now. We need to build AI literacy in education. We need to build AI literacy in our institutions. But it's not always clear what exactly AI literacy is. And Chris and I believe that the way that Library World speaks about meta literacy provides, we think, the clearest way of thinking about the kinds of skills and capacities that are necessary to take advantage of the advancements and capabilities of generative AI. And so this comes straight from the ACRL framework, this idea of meta literacy. And we think that this kind of understanding really does unlock for institutions, for individuals, especially for those who are maybe underserved or excluded, to be able to take advantage of the capabilities of these technologies. And so we're hopeful that librarians are able to translate this kind of wisdom, experience, and expertise in ways that are accessible and actionable for people in the rest of the world who are trying to adapt to how we use this new technology. And the 5th is just this, that the window for shaping the way in which AI is both developed and deployed is not in the future. It's actually in the present. that if we want to have influence on the way in which this technology emerges, advances, and is implemented, then we have to engage actively as participants now. What we find is that these technologies are being built with kind of iterative development and iterative enhancement, much of that coming based on not only advances in technology and technical capabilities, but in their use and in their implementation. And so it is important for those of us in the library ecosystem to both assert and to be unapologetic about the framing of how we think these technologies should be used in ways that are good for institutions and good for human beings.
We're just going to make a guess right now to say that it's very likely that in your libraries or in your contexts, you know some people who are absolute AI optimists, and they are so excited about using AI and finding new use cases, and they're very excited and interested in the potentials and the possibilities, and that's where their focus lives. There are probably others in your institutions or contexts who kind of live or inhabit a very different end of that continuum, and they're suspicious, perhaps rightfully so. They're questioning, rightfully so. Maybe they're hesitant, rightfully so. And what we're realizing is that both of those orientations to AI integration are absolutely essential for our being able to integrate AI effectively. We have to listen to both voices, and we have to keep those voices in tension. But here's the thing, friends, all of us are going to have to level up. Within our context, we all are going to have, because this is an arrival technology, all of us are going to have to understand these tools. All of us need to adopt thoughtful, imaginative orientations and frameworks for evaluating and for using these tools. All must level up. And so that's what we're trying to provide through this book: orientations, ways of thinking about this, ways of thinking about the ethical considerations that we have to begin, that we have to wrestle with. And so, very good. Michael, I'm going to give you the last word. We'll push on to whatever that last slide is there.
Yeah, we are really grateful to be a part of the larger library ecosystem in trying to navigate these questions. Part of the reason that we believe so deeply in the power of libraries to help us meet this moment is because it is not always easy to find fields and disciplines and associations of people who care both about information and the world that that information builds. And so we're just really grateful to be a part of this community, and we look forward to continuing to serve and collaborate with you as we go forward.
Okay, thank you so much, Michael and Chris. That was also excellent. Let's have Delandrus join again by video and audio. And then we have several questions in the Q&A function in the chat that I think are actually applicable to all three of you. So maybe you can take turns answering based on your perspectives as educators and as authors. The first one from Saskia Hill in the chat during Delandrus' session is, how do you talk to your students about AI hallucinations? And maybe Delandrus, you can start with that one. And then Michael and Chris, you can answer based on your experiences working with older students.
Okay, I'm actually going to share my screen a little bit one more time. And this is just one of the other tools, or just one part of another presentation that I've used. So not just in higher ed now, but of course in the K-12 land, we continue to tell students that not everything is perfect, not everything is 100% accurate. And so one of the things what we know about biases and these hallucinations, it's only as good as the data that's put in. If there's a bunch of folks who don't look like me, in many of the categories of demographics that I fit into, or believe like me or think like me, then the results will not, the results may not resonate with who I am. And the same thing goes with our students. And so, being very careful so that they recognize what bias is. This is a part of information literacy instruction. whether it's the ACRL framework or whether it's the AASL standards, it's still the very same. And so teaching students, but in fact, we actually teach hallucinations. We use them as good examples to show them so that they can actually see. And of course, even talking about those different diverse perspectives, teaching students to use their critical thinking skills in order to help them. Of course, if we teach, practice, model, and repeat, they tend to see and recognize when these hallucinations populate actually. And so this is a part of two chapters in my book. It's in part 3 for the school. Oh gosh, I'll put the chapters. I think it's like chapters 9 and 10 when I talk about even building privacy policies and keeping that in mind with the age appropriateness of the tools. But again, with information being put in, I mean, if you go into right now to ChatGPT, not a paid version, but a free version, and you ask it how many R's are in the word strawberry, it is going to reply that there are 2 R's in the word strawberry, knowing good and well that there are more than 2 R's in the word strawberry. And there are a lot of examples of this. And so when it doesn't, if you don't know what a hallucination is, just similar to Go citations, because we also talk about those and we use them as teaching tools. A hallucination is when it really has no data to help it make an answer. And so it just makes random things up, or it kind of blends the line between half truth and half not truth. And sometimes it comes up with something that's very similar. So in other words, if you are looking for reference materials, maybe something for Works Cited or an article, a book, or another means, you can ask it to give you a list of resources to look up, and it knows from what you've typed into the the prompt engine what you've used and looked at in the past, or just like the banners that populate on the perimeters of your screen as you're searching on your phone. If you mention tires, all of a sudden you're going to see a ton of ads on your phone if you've not turned off those privacy permissions on your phone about tires over the next couple of days. It's the same way, right? It's going to put up what it thinks you might know or what it thinks you might want. And so again, it still may not actually be accurate. And so teaching these students to learn about these things helps them become better. So making sure they just don't become over dependent on AI, right? The critical thinking is the most important part of this process. It's a teaching tool to help them. And so, we told us back in the day, we're not going to walk around with a calculator with us at all the time. So we need to learn how to do math the hard way. Well, we've got our cell phones with us, right? And so the same thing is going to go, we're talking about this with AI. AI is not going to go anywhere thanks to Chris and Michael. Yeah, we're leveling up, right? So we just have to learn how to be better users of these tools to help us, because it probably is going to be around for a very long time at different features, different functions, and different levels. So that is just another thing, especially too with AI checkers, as I mentioned before. It may populate that a student has plagiarized 90% of their article. Well, if they put it in themselves 3 times, it's to check it, turnitin.com, it's going to actually, say that they have actually plagiarized themselves in some ways. So even the checkers aren't even as accurate. So again, having the conversations, working with your students, making it a part of your lesson plans, just like we taught in math, you teach students about the mistakes they've made and you use the mistakes to help them become better in their skills and practice. We need to do the same thing with bias, hallucinations, developing policies to help guide schools, programs, districts in the future. Learning from mistakes can help us be better. There's no need for us to all have these hallucinations, for us to all continue with these biases in there too, because the more we use it, the more we're actually training the large language models in order to become better at giving us the output that will meet our needs, output for any of us in the audience, and what we look like, believe, what we think. It will better provide us with results compared to what we need. So I hope that helps. And if you have a follow-up question, by all means, feel free to add that along.
I do
Great.
think that aligning the right tool with the right job is essential here too. Like I wouldn't ask ChatGPT to find me an academic paper ever. But I might use, Litmaps or Research Rabbit or Perplexity. So part of the hallucination is when if you go to the gas station and ask for financial advice, it's not going to go very well, right? And I think the other piece on the technical side is that like when ChatGPT dropped in November of 2022, the hallucination rate was in the 30%. It was high. We currently see benchmarks now that are hovering right about 1%. So we're certainly we're making huge, exponential progress. But trust but verify has always been a good information literacy skill.
And I'll just throw out there really quickly, 30 seconds, that, as Delandrus said, you can use hallucinations actually in your teaching. And what Michael said, the right tool for the right job is really a crucial aspect of this. Yesterday, we did a demonstration with students where we asked them to use ChatGPT and Perplexity and to ask the question, tell me everything you know about the Caledonian riots of 1924 in the London marketplace. Okay. And so that never happened. That's a fake event. The language is similar to language that you might find for different kinds of events, but ChatGPT immediately told us the story. Oh, this is such, a terrible moment in the history of London. So, and here are all the sources that you need to be reading, and so that's what chat does. You go to Perplexity or you go to Microsoft Copilot or another, and very clearly it says, I think you may be confused. I'm not saying anything about this. Did you mean something else? And so, right tool for the right job, and helping students understand that is really an important part of their literacy growth as well.
Great. Question for Delandrus, which Chris and Michael, you might also have thoughts on, but this is with reference to an early part of your presentation, Delandrus. Do you have any insight into the privacy and copyright policies for the tools that you mentioned? Do you have any concerns about AI tools using the data submitted to them as part of their learning, which you've gotten into a little bit in the last few minutes as well? Maybe you can elaborate further.
Oh, you're still on mute.
One of the most important things, of course, is to take a look at privacy policies. If you're working in K-12 land, you need to not just think about FERPA, but also COPPA and a few other things pertaining to students who are under the age of 18. And so with all of these, you definitely need to look at the privacy policies. Just like with social media tools, many of them are really not supposed to be used by students under the age of 16. And a few might be at 13. A student can't go and create a Google account without parental permission. So please do not use these tools if they are not approved by your district or your school. Make sure that you have worked with IT in order to ensure that they meet privacy policies. But you can look at every single tool and you can see they should use words like COPPA and FERPA in some of their descriptions to tell you about the privacy and what they're doing to protect user data. And you need to know this for yourself personally as an adult, but also when you're working with the K-12 world. And so all of these tools have very good means by which you can explore. If you don't see the words COPPA, FERPA, and those things, definitely maybe take a gander at maybe a different tool. But again, you must have parental approval in order for the input for students to type into these prompt engines and for their data to be used. Copilot and Google Gemini have tools for the workspace or for the K-12 means where they are almost like enterprise features and also in higher ed as well. And they do not save or store data. And so it is important for IT to be a part of these conversations to ensure this compliance. You do not want any student data to be put into a large language model and become a part of a data set. That's not at all what we need to have happen. So again, conversations with relevant folks in IT at any level appropriate. It may be that you have forms that go out, whatever is necessary. In higher ed, there are IT departments that look at this on top of with the libraries and even individual departments. Again, this is not a decision that you need to make by yourself. And at no point should you roll out the implementation of use of any tool before you have any of these prior approvals done. So definitely something to keep in mind. FERPA, COPPA, any of those federal regulations, U.S. Privacy Act, like 1970, 74. And I do talk about this as well in part 3 of the book. And reviewing these policies, ensuring that they align with maybe your needs in a school and your district, the age appropriateness, as well as even how to use this to guide and develop your own policy at a school or district level.
I will say too that from some of the bigger providers, they're not going to throw away the empires they've built on a stupid violation. So if you're a Google school, like the integration of those AI tools are all going to be compliant from the jump. So if you're nervous, like stay internal to your already approved ecosystem and then build from there.
And just to throw out there that helping students understand or users understand how to find those policies and how to read those policies and maybe even having to translate those policies, that's a part of the literacies that I think librarians are perfectly suited to help foster and facilitate.
Great. Any quick tips from Chris, Michael, or Delandrus, or ideas about ways to reduce the ecological impact of using AI, just briefly.
This is one I've been paying attention to lately, in part because we have two things happening at the same time. This is an illustration of what's called Jevons paradox, which is a technological principle that as something becomes more accessible, its demand increases. So like as we could make cars more efficient, we bought more cars, right? So there's this challenge where we have this explosion of use. The other complexity is that we have to begin to learn how to better contextualize the data that we have about economic or the environmental impact of AI for a couple of reasons. One, it's always moving. So a ChatGPT search query a year ago consumed 1,000 times as much power as it does today. Like the gains in efficiency are not incremental with this technology, they're exponential with this technology. But the other piece is that, especially if you look in kind of like the New York Times, Atlantic kind of spaces, you're going to see a lot of headlines that get a lot of engagement, but don't provide a lot of context. And so they may say something like, a query on ChatGPT uses a bottle of water. And it's not that you pour out a bottle of water on the ground. It's obviously much more complex than that. My response to this is always, if you're worried about that bottle of water, you really don't want to hear about air conditioning and hamburgers. Right? Like if environmental stewardship is central to your institution, it is more likely, I think, that you will cut back on air conditioning than generative AI. And the other piece that I'll say here is that generative AI is the first technology which not only consumes a significant amount of power, but will actually help us solve energy problems. We're already making advancements in fusion and clean energy because of generative AI. I don't see my air conditioner making much of a contribution to that ongoing problem. And so part of it is to say, yes, pay attention, yes, be concerned, yes, stay informed, but also put it in perspective.
And I think that also nicely answers our last question in the chat about some unintended consequences of using AI. And feel free to elaborate on those further in the chat in the answer to that question, as well as the one from Saskia about marginalized voices and how they're addressed by generative AI. We do need to move on to our next segment, so I want to thank Michael, Chris, and Delandrus for an excellent set of presentations and answers. Really fascinating stuff, and we look forward to hearing from all of you at future conferences and other virtual events, including annual, I believe.
Yeah, and we'll be at ACRL as well, so come see us while we're there.
In the coming weeks.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
So next I want to welcome Jeremy Myntti and Anna Neatrour with Top 10 Innovative Approaches to Outreach and Instruction for Digital Libraries, which is the first in our two presentations about technology ideas from academic libraries.
Hello, I'm Anna Neatrour, and Jeremy Myntti is with me. I think we also have our co-author Rachel Whitman is, I think, lurking in the chat, so she might also be able to engage with folks. Our book is called The High Impact Digital Library, and it features results from a nationwide survey as well as in-depth interviews with digital library practitioners. So today we're going to highlight useful advice from the people we talk to and discuss library projects and case studies that anyone can use in developing their own high-impact digital library. So the first piece of advice that I wanted to share that I really liked comes from Nora Zimmerman, who's the digital archivist and repository librarian from Lafayette College. And so she says that for her, outreach and marketing should be part of the project plan for digital collections from the start. And she has a framework of questions that she asks herself, namely, how do we promote this? Where will we promote it? Who is this going to be useful for? And then she also shares the idea of, if you happen to have a faculty member collaborating on this project, involve them in developing and executing your outreach plan, or have them write some promotional copy or help curate a related exhibit to promote the collection.
So as Anna said, it's wise to be thinking about outreach at the start of digital projects, especially this is important if you're planning a large scale digital program. So one such program that we highlight in our book is the Open Parks Network. The Open Parks Network is a project at Clemson University in collaboration with the National Park Service. It includes many digital objects from many of the national and state parks, as well as multiple university libraries. So as part of this book, we interviewed Christopher Vinson, who is the director of the Open Parks Network, and he just commented on how this program helps not only his institution to do outreach, but then they help the national parks to do outreach. So in his interview in the book, he talks about how he loves going to the national parks, doing on-site visits and meeting with the partners and the park rangers to be able to teach them how to find information on this site so that they can then use that information to share the digital collections with their park visitors and make these collections part of the story of the park. So that then when visitors go home, they have more of a view of what the history of that national park is, and they'll have interest to go to the Open Parks Network and explore the collection on their own.
Another case study that we highlight in the book was from Natasha Hollenbach, who's from the Indianapolis Public Library. And I really liked the way that Digital Indy engages in outreach, external outreach in a variety of ways. They feature their digital library and digital signage videos in their library branches. And they also send out newsletters featuring their digital collections that are associated to send out to neighborhood associations. And these neighborhood associations also provide content which is then featured on their digital library repository, which you can see a screenshot of that here. So I really liked that feedback loop of showing how your digital collections can be directly connected to the people that you're doing outreach to.
So in addition to external outreach, we also need to be thinking of internal outreach. So we don't always think of the people that we're working closely with as people that we need to be conducting outreach with, but we wanted to highlight two examples of internal outreach from the BYU and the Lafayette libraries. So on the right side there, there's a poster that says Digital Initiatives Open House. So the BYU Library's Digital Initiatives Department hosted an open house where they invited faculty and staff from all library departments to learn about the work that's completed within the digital lab. And on the day of that open house, the people that attended were able to see what work goes into digital library projects. And then also they were able to test out some of the equipment themselves to see some of the challenges that people might face working in this part of the library. As part of that, they also put up posters in the lab to help educate people on the things that digital library employees have to think about when they're creating high quality collections. And they also had a presentation on personal digital preservation, so you could learn to apply those principles in your own digital content. Then the other internal outreach project that we wanted to highlight is the Lafayette Library's podcast. So as Anna mentioned earlier in this, we did an interview with Nora Zimmerman from Lafayette. And in that interview, she talked about this podcast that they did. She said, quote, "I did experiment with a library podcast to do a deeper dive into exhibit planning and different projects. It was a fun project and the students loved it and listened to it, but it's very difficult for that to be sustainable when you're the only person working on it," close quote. So with that pilot project, it was very successful to do some outreach internally there. But this project ended up being only a pilot podcast of 3 episodes a couple of years ago and became difficult to sustain because there wasn't the additional support. So in any of these outreach projects, it's important to find the support and the necessary resources in order to continue on them and make them fully successful.
So another thing that I really recommend is cultivate partnerships when possible, especially when working with digital exhibits. So at the University of Utah, we were like a bit behind the curve in developing a digital exhibits program, but that also really came in handy for us because we were able to launch our program right when Omeka-S, which is a popular digital exhibits platform, was launched. So for digital exhibits, I recommend if you can find a compelling project that you can use to go all in on, it can be a great way to incorporate your expertise and then also showcase library collections and services. The one that I'm highlighting right now is called Century of Black Mormons. It's a partnership that we developed with Professor Paul Reeve, who's now the chair of the history department here at the University of Utah. And this unique project prompted us to do a really deep dive into Omeka S's capabilities in order to support this project, in a specific discipline. So it also really helped us level up our skills as well. This project received widespread news coverage in our area, and our faculty partner makes a point of acknowledging the library's partnership and support whenever he's speaking about it. We've gone on to develop 2 additional digital exhibits and a small born digital collection based on this initial partnership. So sometimes just really investing in one project can really lead you to great things down the road and a really productive ongoing relationship with that faculty member.
So another group that would be good to collaborate with and partner with are digital humanities researchers. So one example of digital humanities research that we wanted to highlight here was the Women's Exponent Project that both Anna and I worked on several years ago with several other team members. So this project brought together a team of researchers from digital libraries and the digital humanities side from departments at the University of Utah and Brigham Young University. The team wanted to work on this digital humanities project corresponding with the 150th anniversary of women in Utah being able to be the first women in the country to be able to vote. This project between digital library practitioners and digital humanists brought different strengths to the table for processing the digital collections, then also providing the context and deep subject expertise needed for a digital humanities project. And through this project, the site you can see here is the site that the team created where we explored several themes from this newspaper, such as household hints, women in medicine, suffrage, responses to anti-polygamy legislation. But then we also created a digital scholarship section of the site where users could then download the data set for text mining, or there's another page with heat maps of places that are mentioned throughout the newspaper.
So I really like the framework that UNLV uses for their digital collections program. And this is a great quote from Corey Lampert, who's head of digital collections at UNLV. They try to have outreach built into every project by partnering with a liaison librarian or having someone associated with the project who is a liaison to a target audience. So I really liked this approach of blending expertise. Folks that are more technical can take care of the digital collection and then get some help with their public service librarian colleagues for this kind of outreach. And another point that Corey makes is that if you are, fortunate enough to receive a grant, having a consultant that can develop educational resources for schools and other audiences can be a great way of ensuring that your digital collection has an outreach component built into it.
Right, so the next type of outreach we want to talk about is with rapid collecting and creating collections during an event. So many libraries collect resources related to their local or regional communities. And with the vast amount of digital material that's available to collect in recent years, libraries have really had to develop creative solutions for dealing with this type of born digital content. So in the past, collections have often been donated to libraries after an event, but it's becoming increasingly common to collect items related to an event while that event is still happening. So an early example of this type of rapid collecting and reaching out to people to get these types of collections was with the September 11th Digital Archive at George Mason University and the City University of New York. And then some more recent examples that became popular 5 years ago about this time of year were the many digital collections that started popping up around the COVID-19 pandemic. There were projects such as the Journal of the Plague Year, the Utah COVID-19 Digital Collection, or the Queen's Memory Project. And then another even more recent example is the Saving Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Online, which has had many volunteers across the world working to preserve Ukrainian digital cultural heritage through digitization or web archiving projects.
So going along with rapid collecting, another thing that I think can be really great and rewarding is supporting student or community-centered oral history projects. And I really like this quote from Rachel Fleming, pointing out connections that you can make between student-gathered oral history projects and the open pedagogy movement of trying to get more open materials that people can use out for their own research. So Jeremy mentioned our Utah COVID-19 project. And again, this was a case where one partnership led to even more partnerships because we were able to partner with a faculty member in the history department on oral histories that his students were producing. And then through word of mouth, we had more faculty members approach us and say, hey, I see what you've done with this COVID-19 collection. What can you do for me in the oral histories that I'm working on creating with my students? So the oral history that I have above is something that we just added to our digital collections from students of Professor Ed Munoz, and he's now working on a project that's focusing specifically on law enforcement and the Hispanic community. And those are two of his students doing an oral history with our sheriff, Rosie Rivera.
Right, so the last innovative approach that we wanted to talk about is really just looking towards the future, especially with AI. These two images you see here, we just plugged in some information from our book, some of the high-level topics into Google Gemini, just to see what kind of images it would create related to digital library outreach and instruction. And this is what we received. So when we started working on this book project several years ago, AI was really more of a fringe interest rather than a core concern of so many people. But now here we are a few years later, and AI seems to be a favorite topic for many people to be focusing on, as we've seen in the last couple presentations right before this. So while digital library practitioners have been dabbling in how to use AI to improve workflows and discoverability for many years, the landscape is really changing so rapidly that it's hard to predict exactly where we're going to go in the future. At our institutions, we've started investigating how we might be able to use AI for image detection and description, or handwritten text recognition and analysis. Another avenue that we could explore with digital library outreach would be to use AI to compare university course descriptions or a syllabus with digital library holdings to generate some suggestions for use in teaching. But then AI can also be used to increase capacity to help us process these large amounts of digital library data that's being created, allowing our users to engage and interact with the digital content in entirely new ways. So while there can be some trepidation when thinking about how AI might be changing the world, we can also look to the future with optimism and hope for things yet to come and hope for a better future. Right, so in this presentation, we've shared 10 approaches in several different projects for outreach and instruction for digital library practitioners. And while we've shared just a few examples here, there are many more examples in our book, The High Impact Digital Library. So if you're interested in this, we would just encourage you to take a look at that to be able to help come up with outreach ideas and new perspectives for not only just creating digital collections, but how can we make them more accessible and discoverable for our patrons.
Thank you so much, Anna and Jeremy. It's always nice to hear from both of you. And we will have more questions for you as we end this particular segment. I want to welcome now Emily Thompson, Eric Johnson, and Vanessa Rodriguez with their presentation of 5 things you need for creative technology space and 3 that would be nice.
Thank you very much, Ramon. I put a link to the slides in the chat. We really appreciate everybody coming. And my name is Emily Thompson, and I'm the director of the UTC Library Studio, University of Tennessee at Chattanooga Library Studio, and my colleagues, Eric Johnson from the Virginia Commonwealth University. He's the head of creative technologies and scholarships there. And then also Vanessa Rodriguez from the University of Miami, where she's the head of the creative studio. And we wrote this book, A Complete Guide to Creative Technology Spaces in Academic Libraries, Media Labs, Makerspaces, and more. We are trying to coin a phrase of a creative technology space that kind of encompasses media labs and makerspaces and VR spots and anything else you have where people are either doing physical or digital media in your library. And we particularly work in the academic space. I would also like to give a shout out to our other two co-authors, Kelsey Schaefer and Oscar K. Keys, who helped us write this book. But now for the 5 things.
All right. So yeah, the first thing that you will, of course, need for your for a creative technology space is a space, right? We're going to assume that you and your administration have colleagues have sort of talked out, decided that you need some sort of technology space to fulfill some purpose, right? The question then is, how do you get that space? We found that typically it happens one of 2 major ways. Either it is shaped from an existing space in the library, right? Or it's included as part of new library construction. I would say the ideal approach would be if you could start out by thinking about the services that you sort of need to support. And then from there, you figure out equipment spaces that you'd require to meet those needs. And then you consider all the behind the scenes stuff that you do, the functions like storage, repair of equipment, offices, and then you come up with sort of this perfect footprint, right, that will meet all your requirements and that you can grow, your program into the future in that space. That is a rare thing. I would say super rare. So often, of course, you are handed a space instead. It might be like a closet, right? It might be a repurposed room. It might be some unused area on a floor of your library. And then you're told basically, fill this with services and technology. The exercise when that happens is basically the same with a little bit of a twist. You still want to think about first the needs from your community, and then how you want to meet those. And then you have to, the big thing with a small starter space is you have to really prioritize your list and sort of figure out what you can fit into that space. And the other thing to consider, of course, is that you can start small. And then if you prove you're building a really effective program, something that's really helpful on your campus and your community, then you can make the case to expand, whether that's physically or programmatically, or of course, most likely both. So I would say it's always good to keep growth in mind as you're planning a space, sort of moving from that, like what we need to provide to what we want to provide, let that sort of be the arrow. Over to Vanessa.
Hi. Okay, so as obviously you have the space, you're going to have somebody run or manage the lab somehow. And it may seem like it's something one person can do, but honestly, you're going to quickly find out that it's not. So this picture is us right before COVID hit. I have 3 different spaces in the University of Miami. Each one has 1 full-time staff and probably about 8 student workers between them. The lab did start as 1 person, but the lab also started as a space where it was just computers with creative technology software and 1 person that would help people with the software as it went. They had to hire a new person to extend the hours. And then once the equipment was introduced for loan, then you definitely needed a 2nd person because somebody's dropping by to pick up equipment, and now the person's in a consultation and they have to stop them to do a consultation. And it just doesn't really work if you add both services, have circulation basically and consultations of software or hardware help or things like that. Also adding the student workers really helps us because not 1 person is going to know every piece of software. All of us have areas of specialty and expertise that we can do consultations in. I have graphic design, I have a music person, and then we can fill out the rest of it with not just the staff, but the student workers. And that way we can offer assistance in more things and get expert recommendations on what to buy and what services to keep adding. So yeah, also if you only have one person, if they get sick or ever go on vacation, the entire lab closes down. It's happened to us when we're in between hiring people where we're like, okay, I guess the lab's only going to be open the 4 hours I can be on the desk today. So yeah, back to you, Emily.
I know how computers work. Along with the people that you have working in the lab, if you'd like this to be successful, it's really kind of important to have faculty allies, which is not to say that the administrators and the staff are not important, and the students are definitely important. But the thing about the faculty is they're the ones that are pointing students towards resources. They see those students between 3 and 4 hours a week, depending on the class, or 2 or 3 times a week, depending on when the class happens. And they can be like, hey, well, did you know that there's a space in the library that will help you do that, and point them in your direction? This is actually Professor Sheena Mons. She's a lecturer in the English Rhetoric and Composition program here. And she's an early adopter of multimodal assignments for her English class. And because of her, when UTC got its new library, what was supposed to be like a relatively small space has effectively tripled in size because Sheena had showed that people might want to use that more extensively. So it was between Sheena Mons and Dr. Linda Frost from the Honors Department and several other people. I wasn't here when it happened, but those are the 2 I know for sure. Also, as you grow, these spaces are expensive, and sometimes it can be difficult to show use because sometimes when you're doing things really well, it ends up being a little invisible. So I have what I like to call my unofficial pitchfork list, where if they ever were like, maybe we don't need a studio in the library, I have, 25 people from across campus that I would be like, hey, can you send an email to someone and talk about how you use the space? Because they are also talking to each other, and we are their colleagues, and they can help support us the same way that we support them. And so I'm going to give it back over to Vanessa, I think.
Yes. Okay, so as far as starting off and getting the equipment, we do recommend something simple, something expensive. I will say, okay, yeah, set up your space first, a computer and stuff. The cameras are the most popular equipment for us and for most of people that I talk to who work in other labs. Now, it doesn't have to be a crazy expensive camera. Our cameras run from $500 to $1,000. And they're still very popular, even though they're not like $3,000 cameras with, 3 different lenses to choose from. Right now, our most popular camera is the Canon PowerShot G7X. For some reason, apparently it's a TikTok thing now, even though before that, the most popular camera was the mirrorless. Also, the accessories for the cameras, tripod, you can get a good tripod for $40. It's not that expensive. And maybe additional microphones and such. Aside from that, another one that's really popular with us is the like podcasting. So the Yeti mic, which is basically one mic that's $100 to $130. You can get it on sale. And you just put it in a kit and people love it. Emily recommended the Zoom H series recorders for about $100, and I agree, that's very popular with us as well. I would also recommend lav mics are really popular. So these are all things that you could get relatively cheap. They last forever. Our refresh cycle, and I say that in quotations, is about 4 years. We just look at it every 4 years and see, do we need to buy a new one? Is this okay? When we had the GoPro 4, we're like, yes, we need to move up the GoPros. They're by 12 now. But I have cameras that's been with us for like 7, 8 years. If you take care of it and package it correctly, they can last a really long time. And then the computer, a lot of students buy cheaper laptops that don't necessarily run a lot of these programs. Well, that's mostly for video editing. They can usually handle Photoshop and stuff like that. But when it comes to long form video editing, that's usually when they use our computers. It's because their MacBooks, they're not even MacBooks, their Mac Airs they can't handle long form video editing. So yeah, now back to Eric.
So Vanessa talks about cost of things, right? So budget, of course, is the fifth big thing that's really required to run a space like this. Budget can be looked at a couple different ways. Easy way to think about it might be that you need money to start your thing and you need money to sustain your thing, right? Your lab, your space. We found that startup money often comes from kind of one or a combination of several kind of buckets. If you're really lucky, you might have just the regular institutional funding, whatever that may look like on your campus or in your library, when your regular budget is sort of turned to start up this new space. There also often are special institutional funding kind of opportunities, extra money left over from other projects, or if the institution sets aside money, like a lot of times campuses will do like competitive internal grant programs, and so you sort of make the case and write a grant, and but it's sort of all in-house. But of course, also there are external grants as well. So once upon a time, the federal government may have funded such things. State and local agencies often may have grant programs associated with them. Local organizations, nonprofits will often do grants, especially if they have a tie to your campus in some way. And then local businesses with like philanthropic activity, especially if they're doing something related to the kind of work that is coming out of your space, they might also be a place you could turn to for kind of startup funding. And of course, it may be the case that you won't have any startup funds, right? It could be we have this wonderful idea, we want to make this thing happen, we have no budget for it. And then when that's the case, you kind of have to gather the equipment you've got, handy to you, or the furniture that you've got, just stuff in surplus, all these kinds of things that may be possible for you to pull together. Sometimes you could solicit donations, right? Though managing donations is a whole separate thing that we could talk about, because you don't necessarily want to just accept anything anybody ever wants to give you, because people will dump stuff on you. And then, of course, the other side is you need funds to sustain your space over the long term. Again, ideally, it just becomes a regular library budget line. It's like any other area of operation in the library. I know of places that have developed endowments to fund their technology spaces. So that's a possibility as well. A lot of, especially universities, might have a kind of technology budget cycle of some nature. And what we have at VCU is both a student technology fee and a state level technology kind of program that we can tap into as well. And so we have a whole annual process where we can go in and say, we need this, and sort of make the case for it, all that kind of thing. And then the last way that you might do it is by charging for services or materials. A lot of spaces you may be familiar with might charge for 3D printing, paying for the filament or the time on the machine, or again, charging for some kind of specialized service of some nature. So it is possible to do a little bit of cost recoup that way. I would say the big lesson to think about when you talk about budget is become really good friends with your library's fiscal people. If you have a development office of some nature, those are also a good relationship to cultivate, because they're the ones that you really end up working with a lot when it comes to budget. And back to Vanessa.
Okay, so lastly, as far as circulation, asking what people are taking home, looking at that, the statistics is basically how we figure out what things we need to buy. So that's why I can say the cameras are the most circulated, because I look at our statistics and we need to buy more cameras. Sometimes people will come into the lab and ask, oh, do you have this? Do you have that? And so my staff kind of just makes a mental note like, oh, maybe we should get one of those and see what the popularity is on that before we buy more of them, which goes into the starting with something inexpensive. Most of our equipment is $300 or less, except for the cameras. And I think maybe the Canon G7s are popular because they are easier to use in the DSLRs. We consider the lab kind of like an intro space, so we're not going to have the really heavy $3,000 school communication movie cameras. It's something that we can show people how to use easily. It's something that if it breaks, it's not going to break the bank if it needs to be replaced. Our policies for circulation basically mirror the libraries. The only one that's different that we started was the 5 days checkout for equipment. And then when the library got different equipment, they hopped on to our policy. We have 3-hour policy for equipment that is only to be used in the lab. And that's something that we hopped on because the course reserves has a 3-hour policy. So it was already in the system. So we hopped on to that one. Getting things in the catalog. Yeah, all of our equipment is in the catalog, which for us is Ex Libris, Alma, Primo. Specifically, the items are not discoverable in Primo. We have a separate system where you can see what the items are, but everything is cataloged. It's got the barcodes, and then it's very easy to track who has it, put the fines for lost fees or late fees in there. And it's also where we do the statistics for the equipment. We do have a sample of the record in the book coming up. And then the packaging. So we have what we call kits. So for example, my kit 1 will probably have the microphone. It might have it will have the batteries, spare batteries, maybe a cable that connects to the computer. It will have a windshield. And then everything that's in the kit is listed in the description in the record so that when you check it out, it pops up what's in there. You check, look what's in there, make sure everything's in there. And then when it comes back, same thing. Yeah. Yeah, so everything that the person who's checking out the equipment needs in order to be able to use it and then put it onto their computer. And that's how we package it. And just FYI, the cables are the first thing to get lost. When something gets lost, we will charge the loss fee separately. So if it's a $200 microphone, we're not going to charge you $200 if you lost the SD card. We'll just charge you for the SD card. Okay. Instruction.
So once you start to have enough people, because as my last bullet point says, you can't do this by yourself, you can start to have an instruction program. At University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, this is modeled off of the research and instruction programs, where we team up with classes for a project that is part of their grade. We work across campus. We've worked with tons of departments, everything from philosophy to English to occasionally we'll do comm and art, but often that's mostly file management for them. But we've also worked with biology. One of my colleagues was working with physics, which was a new one, and astronomy this year. So it's all across campus. And it really gives the students a way to think outside of the paper, right? And it takes the techie stuff off of the professor's plate because maybe they'd be interested in doing a podcast, but they don't know how to do any of that. We say, we'll teach them how to do the audio editing. You just have to grade it. Maybe don't have them do an hour each because you have to listen to all of them. It's really about networking and kind of where will you teach and if you need software installed. We do a lot of hands-on software education because we have classrooms that have the software. But if you don't have classrooms with the software, you might have to do something that's a little bit more conceptual. But this can really kind of start to roll once you start to do it. So make sure you have enough people. I taught 4 rhetoric and comp 2 classes today before I came in did this because we have a program with that class where they all have a required multimodal component, which helps us talk to just about every first-year student on campus. So that instruction really drives people back to your space and kind of ups your numbers. But I couldn't do it if I didn't have 2 other librarians that worked with me. And so the last one we'll send to Eric on your specialty spaces.
Yes. So of course, often what will happen is you start your space is a sort of generalized, some sort of creative technology that's important for your campus. And then you want to grow, like we talked about going forward. The easy thing is to start thinking about what you keep hearing people want that you don't currently offer, right? What, like it says, what is missing from the space that you started with? A lot of times what ends up getting added on to spaces like these are things like audio recording studios or even just booths that allow people to do recording, in a silent space. video recording spaces, which can range from a very simple kind of setup to some very fancy, you know, light grids in the ceiling kind of spaces as well. You might not have started with a specific makerspace with the 3D printers, laser cutter, sewing machine, stuff like that. And so you want to add that capability on because you're hearing from your community that that's what they want. The sort of extended reality, so virtual reality, augmented reality, stuff like that is an area that I think more and more spaces like these are starting to support. And then even more sort of refined specialty things, which are very much based on what the needs are in your, you know, on your campus, in your community. Robotics might be one of them, right? Or video game creation, video game consumption, that they're game labs and that sort of thing. Motion capture specialties, printing labs. So really it's a question of like, what is the need locally? There's no universal perfect idea for a space like this. It's very much tied to sort of your own campus and the needs to support the curriculum and to support the faculty, staff, and students there. And then if you do have a specialty space, you may have to decide like it needs a specialist to help run it. You know, if you hadn't had audio and video, you may need to hire somebody with that expertise. And similarly, it may require additional resources. You know, it may consume stuff, it may need new equipment, things like that. So that's going to be part of sort of your budget planning cycle as well. So I think that is us.
That's our spiel. Yeah.
Yeah. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you. There are quite a few in the chat and in the Q&A function for each of you, and for Anna and Jeremy who can return to video now. Invite you back. People are. And I'll share this first one. Actually, I think this is a good follow-up to your last set of what was necessary, or what isn't necessary, rather. From Elizabeth Rehack, having such potentially expensive equipment being circulated, how do you handle damage or replacements?
We've actually been really lucky. So the studio has been open 10 years this year. We've actually been through, our most popular camera is a DSLR style camera called of the GH series from Panasonic. We started with the GH4s and we just bought our first GH7s. So we've been cycling through them several times. And in the 10 years we've been open, we have had students destroy cameras completely 3 times. 2 of those, they were old, like they were more than 4 years old. And so we just were like, I'm sorry, I can't give you an answer on whether or not you have to replace it right now. It's because I need to talk to someone before I charge you $4,000 for this camera that we can't replace. And then we talked to Surplus and they were like, yeah, you don't have to charge them. So one of them, we did actually have to charge the student. He had to buy us a new camera because he put it in his car and drove to Savannah on the hottest day of the year without the air conditioning on. And we put up a sign so they don't do that anymore. And it was a bit fraught and it was really frustrating and nobody liked it. But 3 cameras in 10 years, that's a pretty good record. We have sent stuff off for repair, and we usually charge the students and they're usually fine with it. It's doing it this way has been cheaper than getting insurance though, because we're not having enough damage to warrant insurance.
Got it.
Yeah, I'll say same. We don't really get that much damage. Like I said, little things go missing and then sometimes they'll just bring it back. It's like, oh, the cable's not here. We'll charge them $10. Like, oh, well, here it is. I found it. Okay, no problem. The wear and tear is something that we consider if the camera is 4 years old, if something digital in it breaks, it's not turning on or whatever, then it's kind of like, that's probably not their fault. It's wear and tear. It was time to replace the camera. Usually I don't have the exact number like Emily does, but we very recently had somebody who decided that the GoPro could go underwater further down than the kit said on the cover, and it drowned. So they will have to replace that. That camera's less than a year old.
Interesting. Question for all of you, really, and I'm going to do a combination question here. Can you each talk a bit about your experience of finding partnerships for your projects and planning for technologies, whether that is the development of digital libraries or of these makerspaces or other technology projects. Maybe we'll start with Anna or Jeremy on this one.
Yeah, so I guess I can start on that. So the big thing for me is just networking, like was said on one of the last slides with instruction. Networking is the key to knowing what the faculty and students that you're working with, what their needs are. So going to events, going to classes, talking to your faculty, doing a lot of outreach and liaison work like that, just figuring out who is doing what and also what kind of things interest you and finding your group, the people that you work with well.
Yeah, I agree. I think also like maintaining those connections because sometimes one project will lead to other projects. That oral history project that I have with Ed Munoz, we went out to lunch and he's like, I have this other project. And I was like, I think this might be a digital exhibit that you want to work on. And he was like, okay, I think I can get funding for a student to work on that. So I think cultivating those connections, following up, and then, sort of seizing on opportunities to continue working with the folks that you already kind of know are library champions or library partners is a great way to be effective with that kind of thing.
Yeah, building on what Anna just said, I mean, I would say that like good experiences beget good experiences, right? Like if a faculty member, a class comes and they've had a great experience with your space, and with the services, whatever, they all talk to each other. Like the students will tell other students about, the space, and that helps build it out. Faculty certainly talk to each other about, projects that were really successful and ways that we were able to help them out. And so that really helps us build, again, I mean, the exact idea, right? Build the community of people that is going to kind of champion the work. So yeah, those are our main ways to do it. Like we don't have a lot of external partnership. I was trying to think about that. That's not, we've been lucky that we have not had to develop that specifically.
I bug my friends. So like as I meet people around campus that become like acquaintances or pretty good acquaintances, I will, if they're in the right field and if I can think of something that would be cool, it can be years long process. There's an English professor that I worked on him for years before he was finally like, okay, fine, you can do a podcast. And then last semester, his I think it was queer theory. He teaches queer theory and queer rhetoric, but he let them do like videos nerding out about their favorite media as viewed through a queer lens. They were all like 20 minutes long. They had a blast. I taught them all how to like get scenes that they could put into the videos using Camtasia or other methods. So teaching them how to pirate videos, which meant I got to say "be gay, do crimes" in class, which was fun. But like it took 4 or 5 years for me to get that professor to do something. I also convinced my next door neighbor who's in athletic training that maybe replacing her final paper with a video would be fun. That was a lot faster because she's like, yeah, sure, that's whatever. But yeah, it takes time, and I bug my friends because I do cool things and they should play with me.
Agreed. Question for you all again. What creative technology softwares do you recommend starting off with? And maybe Emily, you can use an example from what you push the students to use, and Anna
It's
as well.
It's relevant for what makes sense for the class, right? Because like using the athletic training as an example, it's a very physical field, and so they can write a paper kind of detailing all the little things that the assignment is. They kind of imitate a particular gait problem, GAIT, and then they annotate it using a video editor. It's like, and pause it and like see how this knee is doing this, and like they can write that paper, but the visual is a lot more relevant for that particular field. So it depends on what they need. Yeah.
But for us, because we're an Adobe Creative Campus, we tend to showcase some of the Adobe stuff. Whereas if we weren't, I would probably push more things that are free software like DaVinci Resolve gets used by certain people, but we have only ever gotten that question once, again, because we're Adobe Creative Campus. But depending on what it is, like Emily said, you might not need something as crazy as Adobe InDesign, and I'll just show somebody Canva. And then we don't have like a universal license for any of the music software for everybody. So we have like 4 different softwares available in the music lab where it just kind of depends what they're working on.
Cool. One more question. I'm not sure of who this is for, but it is from Daniel Oakes. In regards to teaching, our staff in the media lab, faculty librarians, for a second team, or the general library staff, you had mentioned student workers. Regarding instruction, which staff are assisting in teaching workshops or classes?
I'll hop in for us and say all of the above. Actually, quite literally, we have teaching faculty, we have staff that teach, and we are very careful to integrate our student employees in as instructional people. They do almost all of the orientations to our equipment. When anybody wants to come use our 3D printers or use our audio studio, we have them go through an orientation before they're sort of authorized to use it. And that's all done through our students, but our actually Oscar Keys, who's one of the co-authors of the book, is the teaching and learning librarian here, and he's sort of built this very scaffolded kind of instructional approach. And so for us, it really is everybody. I mean, it is occasionally it meant that like we've had to sort of pivot a position from what was a staff position to being more of an instructional librarian position, and that required a change from a staff to a faculty role. But that was a lucky change that we could make. But pretty much everybody here teaches.
We now have 2 faculty librarians and 2 full-time staff. They do the bulk of the instructional work. The students are kind of like our first line of defense, I call them, doing the day-to-day stuff, but they also have a background in something related to multimedia and creativity. So if there's a student in the lab who's just like, how do you do this in Photoshop? And then, the student can just go over and answer for them. If they know Photoshop, they might know InDesign, or they might know iMovie, whatever it is.
So the studio, we are very fortunate that we have 3 full-time faculty, tenure track faculty librarians, and they do the primary teaching with faculty for classes, so that R&I side of it. We also have 3 full-time staff. All 6 of us teach workshops and do consultations, and then the students are at the desk helping to answer questions. We all work the desk as well, but the students can do that teaching right directly at the desk, do the reference work. And we have a lot of people, and we're very fortunate, and I am so grateful.
And I see Eric's comment in the chat. We always say that you can run a creative technology service without technology, but you can't run it without people. Creative people are the magic ingredient. And I'm sure that Jeremy and Anna feel similarly about their work. Before we close out this penultimate part of the program, Anna and Jeremy, did you want to shout out your annual session? I'm not sure if Eric, Emily, Vanessa are also going to be at annual, but I know Anna mentioned that she would have some programming there.
I'm going to be co-presenting on a metadata project, specifically some tools that librarians actually wrote with AI as a coding assistant to work on analyzing metadata for problematic terms and subject headings. So look out for those. There's going to be 2 sessions on that.
Awesome. Well, thanks all. And we are nearing the end of our program. We got one more short session from Carli, Spina, and Rebecca Oling on digital accessibility and libraries. They're the authors of the Digital Accessibility Handbook for Libraries, which you can order from the ALA Store website. Welcome, Carli and Rebecca, our closing session speakers.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. Rebecca, I don't think we can hear you, though.
Better?
I can hear you now, at least.
You can hear me? Ramon, we're good?
Yep.
Great, terrific. Carli, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Do you want to put up the slides?
Yep.
My name is Carli Spina. I'm the head of research and instructional services at the Fashion Institute of Technology Library.
And I am Rebecca Oling, and I'm the Director of Digital Accessibility at Purchase College, State University of New York. And we're going to talk about top tips for digital accessibility now, which is kind of what everybody sort of wants. And it's based on the work for our book, which is the Digital Accessibility Handbook for Libraries. This book, Carli and I envisioned as sort of a one-stop shop, a kind of manual for people who may not be as adept or in the know about digital accessibility. Most of us sort of learn on the job and are already overwhelmed and understaffed. So the hope is that this is a little bit of hand-holding with some concepts, and also includes advice from experts that we've worked with from across areas of librarianship and different types of libraries. So actual advice from the trenches in that. And that should be released in June later this year in time for ALA Annual, where Carli and I will both be presenting on how the new ADA rule will affect your offerings and your library. So our top tip on this, I think, and one of the things that we've really learned as part of our work with SUNY and doing a library accessibility cohort in the beginning of the pandemic, was most libraries really need to do a better job of getting a sense of what we already have and what we're already doing, because our ethos in general is one that is inclusive and one that is service oriented. We always think about Ranganathan and reducing the number of clicks to get to a particular bit of information. So how can we make it easier for our students and our users who need digital accessibility, who might be using screen readers, who might have cognitive issues, et cetera? So what are we already doing to ensure digital accessibility? And how can we communicate what accessibility support we already have available? Can you create a point person in the library or an email address that everyone on your reference desk can see, that every time an email comes in and there's a question about this, somebody is appointed to ensure that that patron gets an answer to their question and makes their search and their time with your library and with your content a little bit easier. And one of the things that I think we benefited so much from in working with the SUNY Library Accessibility Cohort in the beginning of the pandemic was really just getting that sense of being part of something larger, being able to partner up with people. It saves a tremendous amount of time and work. We don't all need to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of information already out there. And you may be part of a larger institution, you may be part of a larger team, you may be part of a larger system, you may have relationships with consortia. And how can you leverage those to ensure that you're meeting this gap need, rather than every single library in that team, system, institution, consortium going through and creating it from scratch? So how can we help each other? And I think probably the one thing that people want to know the most of is like, what's available out there to help me with digital accessibility? We'll talk more about some specific tips for communicating and making things transparent, but you have to know what your tools are. And there are tools all around us, and it's a matter of asking and taking a look. So you can Google a lot of these, but we'll provide you with, in the chat, Carli, can you put in some of these URLs? Getting familiar with using something like the browser extensions that are available to ensure that your website is accessible, checking your color contrast to make sure people who are low vision can properly see what your offerings are. Making sure everyone, including your assistants, your docents, your trustees, know about some of the built-in accessibility features and checkers that are available in so many of our programs. So most of you know VoiceOver from Mac. It's also on your iPhone. You can certainly test mobilely there as well. but something as simple as the Microsoft Accessibility Checker. None of these things are perfect tools, but when you're starting out, they're a tremendous boon, and it also raises awareness on everyone's part. So in the academic world, one of the things that I always work on as director of digital accessibility with the faculty at Purchase College is how can we engage your students in making sure that if they're workshopping papers, for example, they're checking the accessibility of the things that they're about to workshop to ensure that everybody is included. Because when they go to graduate and write their grant proposals, you don't know who's on that board. You want to make sure that your information gets to everybody and can be shared. So there are a lot of built-in things that you already have access to and a lot of free things that you already have access to. And some of that may include free training opportunities. Earlier, in the very beginning of this presentation, we heard about some of the consortial arrangements and tools that you could use to get free training, and some that you have to pay for, certainly. But some of these are absolutely free, and I would say check out what is available from W3C, which is the organization that creates the standards for digital accessibility. Even the Department of Homeland Security, up until today, I can't tell you about tomorrow, offers a trusted tester certificate, and that is completely free. So it's for you to be able to learn how to test websites and get adept at that. And just going through a training like that, it doesn't mean you're going to be working for the Department of Homeland Security. It means you're getting information that can really help you ensure that your patrons are included in everything that you do. And I think one of my favorite things is from DQ University, or from DQ, is AxCon. AxCon is an annual conference that is virtual, that is free. It goes for 24 hours. It's not just specific to libraries, and that's what we were talking about earlier, but it really does offer a sort of broad view of what's going on with digital accessibility, what's new, what's cutting edge, how is AI being used. So this is sort of a culmination of a lot of the things that the previous speakers spoke about, right? How can we really leverage all of that information that's out there for free? And then there are things that are for pay, but we may already be able to use them. So I know as part of the Westchester Library System in New York, they have a relationship with LinkedIn Learning. And so we have a relationship with the Westchester Library System. So at Purchase College, any of our students can sign up for a Westchester Library System card and they can get LinkedIn Learning, which means that any of our employees can also do it. And there are modules in LinkedIn Learning and courses about digital accessibility, about PDF remediation. You have to look at the dates on those, but if you have access to something like that, all of those modules culminate in a certificate that you can also use for your professional development. So I know I saw earlier in one of the presentations, somebody said, how do I get a certificate for attending this webinar because I need to show that I'm doing my professional development? Well, these tools have it built in. The other tool that we've leveraged in the SUNY system is DQ University, and that they're the company that's related to that AxCon conference that I like so much. And DQ University has self-paced modules that in a variety of things. So whether it's customer service for your front end people and sort of etiquette kind of things, or whether it's something really deeper, like ensuring you know how to make sure that complex tables that you're using to show your user data to your board of trustees, to make sure that those things are accessible as well. So anything from saying hello to simple documents, to creating something more complex, to multimedia, these kinds of tools can help you with. And DQ University may have a relationship with the system that you're in already, but one of the things to note about it is that if you do have a disability, you can apply with certain criteria to get access to DQ free. Otherwise, as an individual, you can get access to like everything for $400, or you can do certain tracks with them for a little less money. But they offer the official kind of curriculum so that you could do the certified document specialist training or something like that if you wanted to go deeper. And I would suggest that given the fact that the ADA was recently updated to include digital accessibility, and that the deadlines, Carli will talk about a little later on, are coming in the next year or two, depending on the size of your organization, you probably want to leverage this time to advocate for professional training and professional training that gets you some kind of certificate so that you could use it for your professional development. And then
So I'm going to take over
Carli,
next
yeah.
and talk a little bit about training. So a big part of digital accessibility is training everyone. We have access to a lot of these tools because fortunately there are so many free tools, and your partners on campus may also have access to subscription tools that you can use. But do people in the library have confidence to help patrons who need to use these tools, to test the content that they're creating? One of the things in libraries is that so many people are creating digital content, whether it's handouts for classes, LibGuides content, and do all those people who are responsible for creating it understand this is a big question? And there's a lot of research that suggests, both amongst graduate students and amongst practicing librarians and library staff members, that there isn't a lot of confidence around this. And JJ Pianke has written a lot about how survey data shows that people don't have a lot of confidence in everything from customer service for people with disabilities to these more technical topics. So we really recommend coming up with a way of doing systematic training around the basics of digital accessibility for everyone. And that might differ what it is for, but it's for all library employees. So you want this to be the appropriate training for student assistants, interns, volunteers, docents, tour leaders. Oh, Rebecca, I think we lost the slides. Okay, there you go. Now, oh, can you go back to the previous? There we go. And even maybe your board of trustees so that they understand the needs here. And you might have some training that's really focused on helping somebody at the desk be able to use the technology that your library has. You might have a training group to put together, or a co-learning group put together for all of your web development or web designers, or everybody who designs LibGuides, to go through different types of accessibility checking digital training. You might even have separate trainings that you offer for everybody who posts to social media accounts. But the important thing is to make sure that there is a training plan for everybody, and not to just assume that everyone who is creating digital content for the library knows how to make that accessible, to make sure that this is not just one person's job at the library, but that it's spread through everyone. And this can also take many forms. It can be video training. We've talked about DQ and LinkedIn Learning. They offer sort of online modules. It can be partnering on projects so that you're working together to build and share knowledge, which is something that Rebecca and I have done a lot at SUNY, where we sort of work together. And maybe that partially is about video training or reading things, but it's also about really coming together and asking each other's questions, sharing best practices, and getting more comfortable with testing together as a group. And then make sure that you're learning from existing community members. This could mean experts. So if you are at a big institution that has an IT department, you could bring in somebody who is familiar with digital accessibility to talk to your group. But it can also be patrons and community members. If you have organizations that are a part of your community that are going to be talking about the needs of people with disabilities, that have people with disabilities who are willing to talk about themselves as users of your digital presence, that can be a really valuable learning experience for your library team as well. Next slide, please. And then you really want to be thinking about making accessibility advocacy a part of everything you do at your library. So a big part of this is vendors. So we're going to be working a lot with vendors, I think, everyone here, as it comes to the new ADA rules, since a lot of it is going to apply to what we get from vendors. So you want to be thinking about how you're advocating for and talking about accessibility with your vendors. So for all products, you want to be requesting what's called a conformance review, or colloquially a VPAT. And I'm going to put a link in the chat right now so you can see a little bit more about what VPATs are. These are documents that tell you about the accessibility of different platforms. And most products should hopefully have them. And certainly asking about them is a great part of either starting or renewing a vendor relationship. But you also want to be asking for roadmaps moving forward. If they aren't already accessible, what's their plan to get accessible? And consider even putting language in your contracts. There are a number of organizations that offer language that libraries can use when working with vendors to say, I want a provision about accessibility. And the Library Accessibility Alliance, back when it was part of the Big Ten Academic Alliance, came up with some model language that you can look at for that. You also want to really share about accessibility everywhere you can. Make sure it's a part of your library's values and mission if possible, and think about it as part of your needs statement. So things like RFP language should include questions about accessibility or a statement about your commitment to accessibility. Pass along any complaints, requests, or feedback that you get, whether that's from patrons or employees when you're talking with vendors, because that really will drive them to make those changes that are needed. And partner across your institution, consortium, professional organization. A lot of professional organizations have interest groups around accessibility. Group together so that you can share with each other, advocate together as a group, and really learn from one another about what's happening, which vendors are making changes, how those changes might be advocated for with other vendors. And be careful what you are adopting. Make sure that when you're thinking about what you're going to buy, what you're going to license, or what you're going to share at your library, you have as part of that workflow considering accessibility, considering offering multiple formats when possible, considering what your plan is. If something isn't accessible, sometimes you might have to have a database that isn't fully accessible. You need to then have a plan in place so that if you get a request, how are you going to be able to help that patron to get access to what they need, for example. So make sure that accessibility is a part of all those workflows, all those processes at your library. And one of the first chat I put in there has some about making it part of your procurement process. It's some documents that the group that Rebecca and I work with at SUNY have put together. Next slide, please. So this is very high level what we've talked about today, because we wanted to give you some things that might be immediate strategies, as well as some of the free tools that are out there. But we want you to also feel free to get in touch with questions that you might have, because we know every organization is unique. This summer, we're hoping that we are planning to be at ALA. The book's going to be out in time for ALA, we hope. And it's already available for pre-order at the ALA store if you're interested in learning more. We're also going to be doing a session. Right now, we don't know where it's going to be, but it's going to be on Sunday at 1 p.m. called What the New ADA Rule Means for Your Library. And there we're going to be talking about the new ADA rule that is going into effect for many organizations in 2026, April 2026. And for some of the, some smaller organizations possibly will have a little bit longer. And this applies to public libraries, public schools, public universities, lots of different government affiliated organizations. So it's going to probably mean that a lot of people are particularly interested in this topic. So there are email addresses, but feel free to ask us questions now in the chat or in the Q&A section as well.
I also want to add, I probably should have added to the free training slide, Carli, the Office of Civil Rights videos for accessibility, where they go through actual use cases with people. And I think that that's another thing, is really getting people to understand why we're doing this. So hearing the voices of your patrons who need this kind of technology can be very useful, but it can be very hard to ask that. And so a lot of people don't want to compensate them, which, you know, if you're going to be using them for user testing, you need to make sure you're including them in your budget as well. So it's really important that you get some perspective on how these things are used and what your barriers actually mean for people. It's really hard to engage if you don't understand that.
Okay, thank you so much, Carli and Rebecca. I have a question for you for the immediate. Are there, and you might have gotten to this a little bit early in your presentation, are there certain communities that you recommend to help people keep apprised of how digital accessibility issues are changing rapidly in these turbulent times, and also just to stay sane in the face of challenges to it?
Well, I would say that one group that is doing a lot of really helpful work is the Library Accessibility Alliance. So we can probably put a link to them as well in the chat. They are a group of libraries, but they share a lot of what they offer for free. So they'll give you a lot of information about accessibility right now of different products. They share a lot of testing that they've done, but they'll also give you things like letters you can share with the with vendors and information about what's new. They have sessions sometimes that are open to the public for free. So that's a great resource to keep in mind about. And yeah, I think that's one that I would really recommend. Another one I do think, though they are a vendor, is DQ. I think that they their trainings are often updated. They have a lot that they offer. It is something that you have to pay for, but if you're part of a big organization, I think advocating for getting access to those can be really great.
And I have to say, for myself, I need to chunk things down. I can't take a whole lot of information at once, especially if it's about something that I'm not terribly intimate with. So for me, it's been really helpful to do a couple of things. One of them is there's a Tech Owl from Pennsylvania that actually goes through a whole bunch of different kinds of assistive technologies, even for farmers. I mean, just everything you can possibly imagine. They're short. They're like 1 minute. They're little 1 minute videos that you can sign up for within social media. I follow people on LinkedIn and listen to their stories. Really, sort of before Elon took over Twitter, it was a really robust community, but I've continued to follow some of those people. So if if you reach out to people that you trust in this area, look at who they're following and start following them and reading those kinds of things. And the other thing I really, really love is I love doing like the accessibility meetups. So they're not specific to libraries, but I've met the most interesting people. I mean, I live in New York, so it's bound to happen. But a lot of these also will put out videos after the fact. So I do the New York City Ally Meetups group, and there are people who worked on Etsy and in the White House, and they're all looking for jobs. And so you get a real chance to network with them if you go in person. But if you can't, they do caption properly all of their videos, and they have a lot of cutting edge technology that they discuss.
Are either of you finding that Blue Sky is particularly is becoming a strong community on this front, or have you not really delved into it as much?
So first I tried Mastodon and it didn't go well for me. So I didn't go on to Blue Sky yet, but if anybody knows of a robust community in there, I'm willing to bot it.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of librarians have been moving there, though I haven't personally tried it yet.
I think by the time annual rolls around in June, a lot will be clearer on that front. And hopefully some communities emerge from your session, from the conversations that you'll have there in person.
You need to partner up on this kind of thing. It really helps tremendously.
Well, thank you so much, Carli and Rebecca. This concludes our mini conference. I want to again thank our audience and all of today's 11 presenters: Robin Hastings, Ed Jones, Rebecca Uhl, Delandrus Seales, Chris Rosser, Michael Hanegan, Anna Neatrour, Jeremy Myntti, Vanessa Rodriguez, Eric Johnson, Emily Thompson, and again, Carli, Spina, and Rebecca Oling. If you do not have a copy of the books yet, or if you want to pre-order those that have not been released yet, you can, of course, visit alastore.ala.org. And if you want to keep attending free events like today's, please continue to join us throughout the year. We'll have at least one a month, maybe two. One is already scheduled for next month for School Libraries and Youth Services, and you can learn more about that event by visiting alaeditions.org/events. In the meantime, until that is held on April 16th, I believe, take care all, be well, and thank you for coming today to learn about ALA Tech Tips. Goodbye. Have a great evening all.
Ramon, thank you for all of your help. I appreciate it. I did update our slides. Do you have the link to that, or do you need me to send it to you again?
You can send that to me again, and then I'll find a way to share it with the audience.
Thank you. Have a good night.